Okay. Ms. Lair, will you do the roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair. Community Advisory Council Member Dr. Bueno,
Present.
Hartman,
Yes.
Osmer is absent, Wolfram,
Present.
Mesquita,
Present.
Stedman,
Here.
Groot,
Here.
Capron, and Chair Byron.
Here.
And excuse me, Councilmember Bezira Wist is absent and Vice Chair Levon is absent.
Thank you. So we have a quorum. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to turn to Mr. Hartman and ask if you'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Certainly. Where's the pledge? Please rise. Ready to begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, item number 3 on our agenda. First of all, I'm so glad to see members that weren't able to make it last month. Perfectly understandable. It is vacation time, but we're glad to have you back. Let's open up item 3, public comment for matters not listed on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public that wish to address the community council at this time?
Good evening, council members, Mr. Habashi and staff. Just wanted to comment on a couple items from last month's agenda, which was item number 8. There were some comments by the CAC. Some have to do with charging things, which is kind of the subject today, as well as rebates and things like that. But just 2 comments. One from council member Dr. Bueno asked how Tesla might fit into the EV infrastructure. I thought that was a good question. And just remember, Tesla, don't ignore them, because basically they have a high supercharging circuit, but that isn't necessarily all they have. They have what they call destination chargers. If no one's familiar with that, those are basically 40 amp level 2 type chargers, and they're also located primarily at hotels, businesses, and most of them are free to the public. I was up in Reading on Labor Day, and I used 3 different areas: Best Western, Red Lion, as well as private place that does bed and breakfast. So those are available. I went through the list just to get myself up to date how many are in our tri-county areas. And there are actually 30 Tesla chargers that could be used by Nissan Leafs, Sparks, that type of thing. The key to this is that you have to have what they call a J-adapter, and a lot of people don't know about that, going to allow you to use the Tesla 40 ampere, and that's capital J, and then the last word is adapter, and it's called a stub. They go for about $400 a piece, but I figured if you purchased enough of those in bulk, you'd get it a lot cheaper. So that adds to the charging list. The next thing basically was Chair Byron, who inquired about more than 2% budget goes towards programs. And actually 2% is revenue rather than surplus. Intent to fund programs at 2%. The rest is surplus to be split between reserves and rebates. I guess that was approximately $5 million. I would have a suggestion that when MBC reserves reach 50%, of operating expenses, that the CAC possibly work on a program of putting an income limit on these rebates to eliminate rebates to give it to more of our socially challenged people and not give it to the more affluent customers, thus increasing the amount of rebates go to more people in need. California does this with their EV rebate program. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll close the public comment period. Chair, I'd like to recognize a visitor who's perhaps the furthest that's come for one of our meetings, and that bears some note. I understand that Ms. Bueno is with us here from New York, and that would be Dr. Bueno's mother. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And you get dispensation. You can leave anytime you wish, okay? Let's see. So we need to set the agenda and approve consent agenda, item number 4. There are, I think, 2 items on the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull an item, or do I hear a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'll apologize in advance, but I'd like to pull both items. First, the
No apologies needed.
the minutes for a possible correction, and then second for some comments on the bylaws.
Okay, so we'll do that. Let's go right to it. Please go ahead, Mr. Groot, with your
Sure.
with regard to your
On the minutes, it was noted on page 1 that I was absent last month, but on page 2, on the motion under item number 5, it states that I voted no, and I don't think that's correct. I think if I'm absent, it should be noted as an absence.
Very good.
Actually, yeah,
Okay.
and I actually saw that already and fixed it, so I'm ahead of you.
Very good.
Thank
I
you.
thought
I
we
should've
heard
guessed
them. We
that.
could hear them voting no.
All right, so with that change, I will move that we accept or approve the minutes.
Any other changes to the minutes? A second?
Second.
Oh, thank you
That's
very
right.
much. Public comment on minutes. Do we have any public comment on last month's meeting minutes? Okay, seeing none. The move was by Mr. Groot, second by Mr. Stedman. And please forgive me, I want to do this correctly. Ms. Lair, do we have to do a roll call vote on the meeting minutes? No. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. And now the second item, adopt revised Community Advisory Council bylaws. Before we go to you on this one, because you weren't here last month, let's see how we did with regard to an awful lot of changes by those that were present. Is there anyone else that wishes to see any changes or corrections made to the bylaws as they've been revised?
I have some changes, but I'd like Norm to go
Okay,
first,
well,
since he brought it up.
Fine.
All right, so
I figured out of courtesy, we'd give you the first chance, those that were here, to come back at it. But go ahead, Mr. Groot.
fair enough. And I did submit comments in writing before the meeting last month, but they were not heard. So a couple of those are incorporated in my comments tonight, but I also have some questions on some of the changes.
Did we make a mistake in not hearing your comments for some reason?
No, they were just not brought to the meeting.
Okay, please go ahead.
Sure. Let's see, on page 3, at the top of the page, item C, the sentence is to carry out programs to reduce energy consumption. I question the language of carry out, if there isn't something that we could state that's a little better or more positive
Just to,
than carry out.
that one actually, so the council agreed they wanted this to match the JPA. So this is actually pulled directly from the governing documents for Monterey Bay Community Power, and you can't change those. Because that's the directive of Monterey Bay Community Power itself under the Joint Powers Agreement. And so I just basically, it was a great comment to make sure they matched, but now it matches. So recommend not changing it.
That is I think, an appropriate thing. Do you agree, Mr. Groot?
Sure,
Okay.
and then I'll just ask, is that the same for item E?
Yes, that whole section now is exact replica of how it's stated elsewhere in the governing documents for Monterey Bay Community Power.
Okay, fair enough. All right, then moving on page 4, under Article 3, membership, this is one of the questions that I had last month that was not heard under section 3.01. It does not state what the allocation of the CAC seats are by county, and I had questioned that and didn't really get an answer that I thought was satisfactory, so I'd like to hear why that's not put into our bylaws here.
So who could best answer that for us? Mr. Habashi?
Yeah, I think the intent was to do it exactly the same way it's done for the boards. So it's 5 people from Monterey, 4 people from Santa Cruz, and 2 people from San Benito. And that's exactly how the setup for the CAC is.
So that's a good question then. Should it be in here as well? Is it in the bylaws? Do we know of the policy board or ops board?
It's somewhere. I'd have to go and check, but that's definitely
So would you accept
what was
that?
approved by the policy board, and the policy board is the governing board that makes that decision. So it wouldn't even matter, if something different was stated here, it wouldn't even matter, because it's the policy board's directive that's going to be decision-making with respect to that issue. If you want to have it pulled from their documents and put in yours as well, just for, you know, extra clarity, we can do that. But it is stated elsewhere in the documents that were approved by the policy board. So,
Well, I'm going to say with all due respect, I'm on a lot of boards that have bylaws, and they always state how the constituency of that board is made up. And this is an important council, and I would think that we would want to make sure that everyone who reads these bylaws understands how the appointments are made and where they come from.
Good, very good
We'll,
point.
we'll go ahead and make sure that it's in there somewhere.
Mr. Capron, do you want to add something?
Are you sure that that was documented in the policy board approval? Because I thought when I was talking to the supervisors before we were appointed, that they made a decision among themselves to do that when they actually chose the appointments from the applications, but that they weren't bound by that according to what the policy board had initially put forward. That I thought that the idea was that that would be a goal, but they also wanted to let other factors determine what their final selections were.
I do remember that one of the hearings where we got the approval for putting together the CAC, that did actually state that they want the arrangement to be a 5-4-2,
Okay.
very similar to the way they have the boards set up.
I'm pretty sure it's in the operating rules and regulations for Monterey Bay Community Power, but I agree, especially since there's confusion, we can add it to the bylaws here as well.
Great, thank you.
Very good.
Appreciate it.
Please continue.
Page 10, item G, excuse me, what's now double I. That sentence, I think, is a grammatical error, because if you read the secondary rules of the chair are as follows: member to perform his or her duties of CAC. I'm sorry, I apologize, my voice is going because I have bad allergies right now, so if I break up,
I'm
excuse
sorry,
me.
can I have you back up? Where are you?
It's on G, it's on page 10, G, lowercase I, and you can see it begins member to perform.
Oh, right. Looks like a typo.
So there's an error there.
Okay.
Just ask that you clarify the sentence, thank you.
I did that only to save your voice.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right, next, page 12, item 7, or section 7.02, attendance at meetings. And this goes to both A and C. My board tracks absences, whether they're excused or unexcused, and I think it would be important to keep a track of that here so that when appointments come up again, we have some sort of record of whether or not people are participating and notifying when they cannot be here. So I'm asking why the references to unexcused absences were removed.
So the council agreed that they wanted to remove that language because if any member misses more than 4 meetings, regardless of whether they're excused or unexcused, they're automatically off the board, and that was of the council, and that was another thing that was agreed. So the concept of excused and unexcused seemed kind of superfluous, was specifically agreed to be taken out. I don't know if you all remember talking about that, but that was something that was discussed in depth.
I think that's all correct. A lot of discussion went around that.
All right, well, then I'm not going to belabor the point. I will defer to what everyone else conceded to last time then.
Thank you.
And then page 13, question of how this is ordered on these bullet points, and I thought that item number or letter, it looks like J. The changes to the agenda subject to the Brown Act requirements. I thought that that should be more towards the top rather than buried at the bottom.
That's fine. It wasn't intended to be in an exact order. It's just generally it shall include. We took out the concept that there was an order to the list, but we can move it towards the top if you'd like.
I would prefer that, thank you.
Yeah, so it just has to, these items need to be on the agenda, or I think, may be included on the agenda, or, no, this says shall include
Shall.
items on the agenda.
Yes.
So the order we actually scratched there at the beginning, you can see. So thank you, Ms. Lepanovich, that you'll put them in a reasonable order. I think Mr. Stedman wanted to comment? No, he'll hold, okay.
Well, and I thank you for doing that. I think it's important that if there are changes that are subject to the Brown Act, that we know that at the beginning of the meeting rather than buried at the bottom.
Gotcha.
Thank you. So those are my changes.
Very good. See, I knew we missed you. So of course, we're gonna spend a little more time on this, but I forgot to say this early. I appreciate all the effort that went into capturing all the changes that we did. I think we spent a fair amount of time on this last meeting, and I think you've done a very good job of doing that. Our hope here is, I should say my hope is, if the council agrees, that whatever changes we do agree to here now, that we might still be able to vote and approve these so that we can get this to the operations board and the policy board, because it's really for their approval, correct? In other words, we're recommending our bylaws for approval.
Policy board is gonna approve them.
Policy board,
Gonna approve
thank
the
you.
bylaws.
So, was there any error in what I said there? Okay.
No.
Mr. Stedman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say that I'm fine with the changes that have been made, and an excellent job. I would also just remind the council that this is a dynamic document, so if we have issues that arise down the stream, we can always come back to this and make changes as appropriate as needed. So I'm more than comfortable with using this as a foundation on which we can build.
Excellent. In fact, is it something that the council should visit every year, is looking at our bylaws? Well, so I'd like to just, if we can, somehow note that, so that maybe every year, when we do our elections, we also revisit the bylaws as well. It'll make everybody put them front and center in terms of making sure we're adhering to them. Mr. Hartman, do you want to go?
Certainly. So I have just a couple of things on page 3. I appreciate the correlating this with the JPA document, but under E, it says reliability for residents through local control, and I wonder if residents should be changed to a more encompassing word, like ratepayers or constituents. So that would be one recommendation.
Almost positive I just cut and paste
Yeah.
from the JPA, but I'll double check just to make sure, but
And
I'd be
I have to
surprised if that
object to
was-
ratepayers. That is just an, oh.
Whatever the word, I'm just saying, like, I think it needs to be.
Customers maybe, but
Residents
ratepayers,
is just
no.
such a restrictive word, and I think it needs to reflect everyone,
All right.
right? That's part of Monterey Bay
Can you
Community
just use the word community? Would that do?
Well, whatever is the same language, I think Ms. Lupanovich's argument is a good one, that we'll copy whatever language is in the
Yeah,
directing document, the policy board.
which I
And then just
check.
the last comment I had was on page 5 under 3.02. It talks about the part in red. It says the CAC liaison or his or her designee. So it sounds like the chair can designate a liaison, and then the liaison can then designate another liaison. Is that the intent?
No,
No.
That's the way that I read it. I don't know if I'm misreading it.
we
but-
could say or their designee, but I think instead of being both of, I think that it's properly worded, or his or her designee. So, no,
Okay.
it's.
Okay. If
It's
there's
our
no
in-
change, then that's
Our
fine.
intention is to try and provide a live body to make the report.
Just the way that I read it just sounds like you can keep kind of passing the baton.
There's also a correction in there. You could probably see it later on. It's about the 4th line down. There's just a space missing between that said. All right, go ahead.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. No other comments. Excellent. So, again, I'd like to Ms. Lepanovich, thank you very much. I think you did an excellent job of capturing all of this. I'm just thumbing through real quick to see if I highlighted anything. Mr. Groot found that one. Nope. So I think we can go ahead and do a vote on this.
After Director, you have public comment?
Public comment, thank you. Thank you for reminding me.
Yes.
I'm suffering a little jet lag, so I'll take all the reminders I can get today. Any public comment on the revised bylaws?
Yeah, just a quick one, which I may have missed last time. The term power procurement, did that get resolved with Seth being gone and that
Good
situation?
question.
That's all I had.
I did check with Mr. Caprone, so let's see what he has to say.
I appreciate that almost everything I suggested was incorporated into the revised bylaws. I think that if we said procurement policy, it would address the issues that staff had about, clearly we don't want to get involved in the day-to-day operations. I think that the rest of the wording that's in there is pretty comprehensive, that we can bring up any issue having to do with operations or policy, which is, covers pretty much everything. So I think it would be good to understand that by not putting it in, we're not precluding us talking about procurement policy, but I don't think the wording needs to be in there because I think we have some very broad language in there now.
Very good.
Hello, folks. Brennan Jensen with Emerging Ecologies. Really glad to see the bylaws moving forward and very nice additions. I did want to just ask one question about the edits that happened for section 2.01 around purpose. So it's already been stated that that language was edited to match the JPA agreement, and I noticed that reflects the JPA agreement section C. I would like to request consideration that be expanded to also include the language within section D. Section D talks about the intent, and it specifies the desire to establish short and long-term energy portfolio that includes state, local, and regional, and also speaks to the importance of local power procurement and build-out. That was a really essential element of our initial agreement, and why many of our jurisdictions came to the table and signed into the JPA agreement. So I agree to Seth's points earlier that there is already inclusive language that doesn't preclude you from talking about this, but given that this is such an important critical issue for local power build-out, that I think it warrants being specified explicitly.
So, Ms. Jensen, you identified yourself earlier. What was the organization?
Emerging Ecologies.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So are you proposing some specific language?
I would suggest, since the rest of this section comes directly out of the JPA agreement, that comes out of section C, I would suggest that the language add section D, A, and B as well. Or at a minimum, DB is the section that speaks to the local
I can read. You want me to read it?
energy
to help?
portfolio.
So
Yeah.
that the section she's referring to, it's the following after in the JPA. It says the purpose for entering the agreement shall include, and then as we've said, it's like cut and paste to what you see now. After that section is the section D that Brennan's referring to, and then it starts with, it is the intent of this agreement to promote the development and use of a wide range of renewable energy sources and energy efficiency programs, including but not limited to solar, wind, and geothermal energy production. And then how much more do you want?
It would be all the way down through B.
So I think the request is to add the intent of entering into the agreement as well as the purpose of entering into the JPA, and then copy and paste that directly from the JPA into your bylaws.
So I just thank you for that clarification. I don't think that this council is interested in bypassing what's already stated in the JPA agreement. I think all we're trying to do in the bylaws here is state the goals, the purpose and function. So I'll turn to the council and ask if anyone has any strong feelings about this.
I think that those are important aspects of our purpose and function. So if we are including one, it really would be appropriate to include the other, because otherwise it's putting emphasis on one and not the other.
Anyone else? Thank you.
I'm just going to add that I'm not familiar with this language off the top of my head, and I'd like to see it in writing before I vote on it. So if we're going to do that, then we're obviously delaying a vote on this because I'm not going to support that at this point.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
In the interest of streamlining, we're talking about the purpose of this this council, not of the JPA. So, you know, if we start copying language, we're sort of diluting the purpose of this council. We're trying to make it specific to the bylaws of this council. Otherwise, we get to just adopt everything that's been written for the policy committee and the governing board. So I have no problem with being more specific if that's the way the rest of the council wants to go. But, you know, there's I think we have that as a guiding document, and we're an umbrella under that, so I think we're covered.
So, thank you. I think you said it better, but that's the same message that I was trying to communicate. We're not negating that in any way. That's the intent of this committee. But it's just, in the bylaws, just trying to state, you know, succinctly what it is we're supposed to be doing. How much more detail do we add to each one of these? We could, but again, I think Mr. Groot's comment about not seeing the language and delaying this, that concerns me too. Any other comments, Seth?
I wonder if there's any practical delay since the policy board won't be meeting until December, I believe. So we'll have an opportunity to meet again before they will be voting on this.
That was going to be my point. There isn't really a need for a rush on this, and I agree with including that language.
Okay.
I don't think it's
so.
unreasonable.
It is December is the next policy board meeting, Mr. Habashi?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, is that the consensus here? Shall we delay a vote and see what the language is that we would be adding at this suggestion? Okay.
That would be my favor, yes.
Yeah.
I would recommend, would you feel comfortable reading it right now and discussing it, or do you want to go home and read it and then come back and discuss it? I was just trying to make sure I have time to implement your changes, because that would mean there's another meeting, so it's going to be 2 more meetings before you can have final bylaws, because you're not considering it right now. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is still on track. I just want to make you
Is
aware
it
of that.
just-
It might be
It
2
couldn't
more
be
months.
accepted at the next meeting?
Yeah, why do we have to go
So
through
the intent, Ms. Lepanovich,
I
would
don't know
be
what to include right now. Do you want me to?
the intent would be to the document that we've got now that you show all the changes in. We've all agreed to here. So you could go ahead and make those changes, accept all those changes, and then just add this language so that the council could see just that change. And we'll take it as a consent item on next
Okay.
month's agenda. And if we all agree to the change, then done. If not, we'll pull it off consent and we'll remove that proposed language, and then we'll try another vote on that.
Okay.
If that's okay then?
Yes.
That kind of approach? Is that clear?
Yeah, I understand now. Thanks.
So go ahead, Mr. Sedman.
Well, I don't think there's a problem with the language that's been being proposed, and I'm ready to vote on it. I don't know if there's any way, we have all this multimedia, can we just put a copy of the language up on the screen just to let folks take a look at it? If that's the issue.
That's what I was wondering as well. Not sure how to
Because
do
we're
that.
not talking about a major rewrite of it's just a small section. We're very close, and
Right.
it'd be nice to get something done.
So just before are you up for another reason or the same topic?
I was just going to try to clarify if it might be helpful.
I'm concerned, Mr. Groot, you want to see the language in writing.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mr.
and
Chairman,
that's
if you just
very
allow us
legitimate.
a little time, maybe we can move on to the next topic while Bren is trying to get that language on her laptop. So eventually you can come back to it if you don't mind, and
That'd be fine.
maybe in half an
That
hour.
was
Okay.
exactly what I was going to suggest. If we could move on to something else and maybe come back to this at a little later date here, or later time, excuse me, I
Later
think that
time
would
on
work.
the
I just
agenda.
want to see it in writing because I've had a long day. I can't synthesize it as fast as everyone else is.
All right. No, I think it's very legitimate, Mr. Groot. I'd like to see it as well. So,
And just to add a more general comment, it might be good for everybody to know what the JPA states, because that's really the governing document that created this agency. So I would recommend everybody reads the whole thing.
Is it in our binder? Yes, it is. Okay, well, so now we know where it is.
Sure,
Stedman?
but a lot of us have not read it since it was passed, so.
Can we just look at it in our binder right
No,
now?
hang on one second. Hang on, Mr.
Well,
Stedman.
just with respect to the language that's in the JPA, if we can think of better language that's more appropriate, let them copy us then, because if it means the same thing and it's a cleaner version, then I think we shouldn't be beholden to recreate exactly verbatim what the JPA states. I mean,
Well, see, that's the difficulty I'm having, is all we're trying to do is state what the purpose of this organization was. So we're not going to go make up a new purpose. We're just going to take it right out of the JPA. And now we're adding additional language and detail to just what our simple bylaw purpose is. So here's what we're going to do, if it's agreeable to everybody.
It's on the screen now.
We have it. So what page were we
You're
talking
there.
again here?
It's-
Page 2?
It's D, A, and B on that page you're looking at.
So yes, but on our bylaws, I want to understand, it's on page 2 of the bylaws.
It's not on page 2. You'd be adding, on the bylaws, you'd be adding to Article 2. You'd be adding basically a section 202, and you would be cutting and pasting from the JPA, section D, A, and B on that. Those are the recitals of the Joint Powers Agreement. You'd be cutting and pasting that and inserting them into your bylaws as a section 202 under Article 2. That's the proposal.
So we're adding a new section 2.02 and renumbering the remaining sections into the subs.
You're just going to be adding an additional section is what is being proposed.
But yes, renumbering.
Okay,
There's no,
and what would the title of that new subsection be?
probably intent.
well, if I may, it talks about the agreement, and we're not in an agreement.
Right.
That's not our function. That's totally different. That's for the JPA.
Yeah.
So, once again, we need to get this back to this council. And if you want to say, this is what's in the JPA, you could have that heading, we're rewriting or we're just writing it down again. But that doesn't really pertain to this body as I see it. That's the guiding agreement for the JPA.
I agree.
I would agree with that too.
We're trying to be responsive here to public comment, and I think we're getting ourselves wrapped up around the axle. No specific language was proposed, and this doesn't work.
I mean, you could fix it by saying it's the intent of this council to assist in the promotion and development and use of wide-range renewable. I mean, that gets it.
Yep.
But, I take your comments to heart, because it is sort of hard to reword on the fly here, so. I don't know I haven't read the whole document, if that's gonna change meeting elsewhere or something.
So I'm just pausing to read this.
Do we have a section that describes the responsibilities? Do we have a section that describes the responsibilities of the CAC? No, I mean here, in the bylaws.
There's a great deal of detail in here. And it's not as though we're not disagreeing with this. We're not saying this is not important. We're saying we're going to follow this in terms of our recommendations. It's just way too much language and detail that needs to be added to our bylaws.
May I
at this
suggest
point.
something, Mr. Chairman? We have a section in here that describes the purpose of the CAC. So what if we just add, if you trust us, to add another paragraph to it that will say that the CAC will promote renewable resources, local, state, and in general. We'll summarize this instead of adding another 3 paragraphs. We'll just have a single sentence that will describe what those 3 paragraphs are saying, and we'll add that to the responsibilities of the CAC.
So as you're proposing to condense this language into a new section 2.02.
Yes. Would that work for everybody?
Well, what may be simpler is just to have a new section saying it is the intent of this committee to follow, and you could just say, reference whatever it is you want to get in the document. I'm still unclear if we leave this out, how that really impacts us, but
I'm trying to take the word intent out of it and just have whatever that is that's in there become part of the responsibility of the CAC.
All right, so far, the only comment I've heard amongst council members is from Mr. Capron that you would like to see this added. Do you see the challenge that now represents to us? How do you feel about moving forward with this
I
ad?
think Tom's suggestion is great.
Okay. So we will still need to see it again next month.
Well, and I like the suggestion, but I'm just wondering, isn't it duplicative of item E there to promote long-term electric rate stability and energy security? That's saying the same thing.
I think electric rate is different than what I think this section is trying to promote,
This is
which
about
is
procurement.
placement or development of local and state renewable resources.
Mr. Stedman?
I have a lot of faith in Tom and his ability to make this work, and I'm ready to go on this. So I'll just say that without being too anxious.
Mr. Osmer?
I apologize for being late, but
We're glad you're here. I'm sorry. I didn't notice that you
It's
came
okay,
in.
thank you. It says here, pursuant to the Joint Powers Agreement that created MBCP, the key goals of MBCP are as follows. Has that been changed? Or is that still
No, it
what
has not.
2.01? So there's no need to add a 2.02. It would be added to this. It's simply a restatement, per the introduction, it's simply a restatement of the key goals of MBCP. So, I think that's pretty forthright.
So what are you proposing?
I'm simply going along with the clarifying that there's not another section, that it's in 2.01, and that it's simply the goals of MBCP. It's not a description of the purpose of the committee.
Okay, so I'm just trying to, what conclusions should I take from that? That we would go,
Just statements of fact.
leave it as is, add something, go with Mr. Habashi? I'm trying to understand what you're saying.
As long as it mimics or repeats the key goals of MBCP, then it's in line. If we want this section to be about the purpose of the committee, that's another thing.
I'm still not following you. You said it, and that's the problem. When you say it, you mean our bylaws.
Section 2.01, purpose.
Of our bylaws.
Yeah.
I'll turn to anyone else for a
Can I- yeah,
response.
so-
Please.
I think 15 minutes now on this topic.
Yep.
I think that with regards to fluidity, I agree that it is a fluid document, but I also value the fact that we should have our first iteration be something that we're all proud of. I think Mr. Abashi's recommendation of kind of synthesizing that for us next meeting is probably ideal, and then we can kind of go over that granularity next time, because I think overall we can sign off on this next meeting. But I think just a little synthesis would be ideal. We can sign off on it next meeting.
Thank you. So what I hear is we're calling the question here. Is there enough comment from everyone? Okay, so then I believe the way to handle this would be to call for a vote as required on this agenda item.
What are we voting on?
We're voting on whether or not we approve the document as written.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to
Given
make
the
a motion that we continue this item and bring it back
Better.
with the added language that Tom said that he could put together for us, synthesizing this.
Okay,
Second.
I'll second.
very good. Second by Mr. Osmer. All in favor?
Wait, discussion?
Discussion.
Sorry. I'm probably not going to vote for this because I think we have a document that we can be proud of and we should move forward with it at this point and make the recommendation to the policy committee. So I think coming back next month with a synthesized statement is not going to improve this document significantly. So I'm going to say that I would like to see us move forward with it tonight and get this approved with the changes that we talked about, other than what we've been discussing for the last 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
If I may make a friendly amendment to the motion, I would propose that we put our faith and trust in Mr. Habashi to synthesize the document and then vote on it, giving him that direction to make it correct. and reflect what our comments have been thus far. And then we can go ahead and I'd be prepared, as I said, to vote on it tonight, just to get it finalized.
Under discussion, I don't see the need for the rush, so I'm perfectly fine with the way the motion was proposed. Public comment?
I don't see how your amendment works to then vote yes on this. Okay, so you with me?
No, I don't. Like I said, the amendment would be to direct Mr. Abashi to make the changes that we've requested.
You're basically voting to approve
Yes.
with the change.
And so that would be the motion to approve with the changes stipulated by the council. Because I think we're pretty close, and, if it's not a big deal either way. I really,
Okay,
I'm
so
proud of it.
friendly amended made. I want to get through this.
Yeah.
Do you accept the
I'd
amendment?
like to go ahead and vote on my motion,
Good.
please.
Okay, and we have a second. Any further discussion? Please restate it shortly so we all understand what we're doing.
To continue this item, bring it back on our consent agenda next meeting with the addition of the changes that Tom was going to make, synthesizing the section from
Right.
the
you.
foundational documents.
First and seconded discussion complete. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we will revisit this document, hopefully on the consent agenda next week. Thank you. Next month.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Thank you all. So I'm working my way back up to the agenda. Forgive me.
CEO report.
So item number 7, the CEO report, Mr. Habashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Biggest issue is, of course, is the PCIA. We have a proposed decision, alternate proposed decision. There was a meeting scheduled by the CPUC last week, I believe, where all the parties came in and stated their case. There will be another meeting, a closed session by the CPUC on Monday to discuss the rate setting associated with the PCIA, followed on the 27th with the CPUC coming together and deciding whether they will accept the proposed decision, the alternate proposed decision, or something in between. So this whole thing is going to be hopefully resolved by the 27th. If they don't resolve it then they can continue it until October 10th, I believe, or 9th. I forget exactly which. That doesn't end the process. There will be a second phase to the PCIA resolution, and that second phase will involve a lot of negotiations between the CCAs and the IOUs to establish a framework by which the IOUs will auction their resources in order to get us to a point where we know exactly what the PCIA is like, or at least to a reasonable degree. As soon as the decision comes out next week, I will definitely send an email to all of you saying what the decision was and generally how it will impact us. So you don't have to wait until next month to hear about it.
So it's a major item, isn't it?
It's huge, yes. Yeah, and the difference, if I didn't mention it last time, between the proposed decision and the alternate proposed decision is somewhere around $44 million in revenue for us for 2018, 2019. Second item I wanted to report on is the status of the long-term power agreements that we are negotiating. We pretty much put the final touches on both contracts. We could have got one of them through to the operations board in September, but we decided, in light of the issues surrounding the PCIA, to hold back. We are more likely to bring both of them. Actually, I would say probability is 90%. We'll bring both of them to the operations board in October. And of course, you'll get to see them after that. The Go Local RFO, we still working on it, holding back on it also in lieu of the issues surrounding the PCIA. And again, we'll bring it back here as well as to the operations board in October to give you a quick review of what we've done so far and how many of the projects that were offered that we want to pursue further. A couple of things happened, by the way, today. One of them is we've learned that the governor signed SB 237. This is a direct access bill allowing another 4,000 gigawatt hours in the state to be able to access whichever suppliers that they may choose. There's plenty of customers are in the queue waiting to be able to jump on that bandwagon. 2,000 of those gigawatt hours are likely to be in the PG&E service territory. We'll be getting together with a bunch of other CCAs to discuss strategy as to how to deal with this issue. And finally, we wanted to talk about the CAC annual summit. It was very successful. We had many of you were there, and Dennis was there on one of the panels. We are trying now to bring that annual meeting to Asilomar every year, and we hopefully will be successful. I got to make a pitch to the rest of the CalCCA board. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Very good. Lots going on, short and sweet. Thank you. Any comments from council members or questions? Hartman.
Sure, yeah. Mr. Habashi, in your report under the Go Local RFO, I just wanted a little bit of clarification. I didn't quite understand the numbers. 37 unique offers to build 25 small scale renewable projects.
Yes.
I don't get the math there. Are you getting multiple? You got multiple offers to build the same thing?
I'll ask Dennis to step up.
Okay.
We can
Dennis
understand
is not
37 unique offers, but
to build 20.
maybe it's only 25 out of the 37 projects were renewable projects.
Oh, I think it was 24 developers with 37 projects. 24 unique responses to request for offer, and 5 to 20 year term, installed capacity 1 to 3 megawatts. So I believe it's 24 responses to build 37 different projects.
Okay.
I think that's how it was.
Maybe the numbers are backwards.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry. Too much PCIN on my brains.
Any other questions? So, Mr. Habashi, I thought that your short analysis on the PCIA, having tried to keep abreast of this for a number of years, was very fair and objective. I mean, it's a really complicated matter. As I read the proposed decision and the alternative, and it gets into just so many esoteric issues and new terms that are being introduced. It looks like they've even named a term after the governor. There's the Brown factor and the of course, it's not. It's brown electrons, I'm sure. Would you care to comment, or would it be inappropriate on the proposed alternative, which is before the commission? Because I understand it's being proposed by two commissioners, the chairman and Commissioner Peterman.
The alternate decision, or the alternate proposed decision, was proposed by the presiding commissioner, which is Commissioner Peterman. At this point, that's the only person that we know have pushed that decision forward. I would anticipate probably the president, Picker, is maybe leaning towards or supporting that, but that's just a guess and nothing more. All we know now is the alternate, the administrative law judge, which is Judge Roscoe, is the one that's proposed the decision. So
Right.
he has the proposed decision after he heard all everything that everybody said about the subject. He heard from the IUs, he heard from us, and he heard from everybody. So he heard all the testimony from everyone, and he came up with a proposed decision. And a couple of weeks later, Commissioner Peterman issued the ultimate proposed decision, generally agreeing with everything in the proposed decision, except all the things that were beneficial for us.
Well, certainly this is something that the citizens of our community should be quite concerned about. Is there something that we should be encouraging them to do?
We have actually sent letters that to the policy board members as well as you folks to send to the CPUC. We've got an ad in the Chronicle signed by 120 different mayors. Many of them are our mayors. So we are just going all out to try to get things to go a little closer to the proposed decision by the judge instead of the alternate proposed decision.
I saw that letter. I think maybe everyone may have seen it as well, that open letter in the Chronicle. I thought that was really powerful. I don't recall ever seeing anything like that as commissioner at the Energy Commission. So I would hope that the PUC would pay attention to what elected officials have to think. Okay. I don't think I'll continue on any other comments from your report. Thank you very much. If there's no other comments, we'll move on to the next item. Public comment. I almost got you before you corrected me. Thank you. Would any members of the public like to comment on the CEO's report? Thank you. Moving on to item 8. The heart of the reason I think we're here today. Council members, this, again, I just want to go back up to, Ms. Lair tells me we're going to move away from hard copy printouts soon, and we'll be doing this all electronically. So I'm afraid I'm not fast enough on my computer to get back to the pages I want, but just to prepare you all ahead of time. Oh, the other thing I should probably mention to you as well, you'll notice the microphones are all on. They've been reprogrammed. And those of you that have served in public service or on councils in the past, you know the microphone is always on. So I'm just reminding all of the council members here that the members of this council, that the microphone is always on. We're going back up to item 8, this is an action item. This is regard to all the programs that are being proposed for energy and consulting support. Mr. Habashi, I'd like, if you're going to introduce it, I'd like to ask that you make sure, make clear what the action is that you're requesting of the council. So please go right ahead.
I think what we're asking is just an approval of the general direction that we are taking. I want to emphasize that what we're asking for today is not the end of what we're going to be talking about when it comes to programs. We're actually going to be here every month talking about the one program or another, and how we want to carry on each and every one of them, and for the foreseeable future, because I think that's one of the key issues that this Community Advisory Council was formed in order to do. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be asking JR to go ahead and do the introduction for the item. Beth is going to come later on and talk about everything that's included in this report.
Thank you, Tom, and good evening, everyone.
Excuse me, more than JR, can you give us?
Yeah, how about that? So I'm JR Killigrew. I'm the Director of Communications and External Affairs at this fabulous, innovative, cutting-edge community choice energy program. So
thank you,
you all
Mr.
should be
Killigrew.
supremely proud of what we've been able to accomplish and what you're about to continue to accomplish moving forward. So I do want to kind of highlight the PCIA before I jump in, because that is arguably the greatest financial impact that impedes our customers. We've kind of estimated at about $100 million a year. So in terms of like
that's the total PCI.
Just for Monterey Bay County region, just for our service area, on an annual basis.
The current calculation of the PCIA is $100 million a year.
You know, when we start talking about reinvesting in the community with these programs, it's great that we have dollars, but there's still a huge amount of money that's not getting put back in the pockets through this fee, as they call it. So again, we just hope that folks can advocate, send letters, do whatever they can. We just want a fair and balanced approach.
So I just want to make clear here what your $100 million is, because I think everyone is in agreement that the investor-owned utilities do have some charges that we need to incur as we exit their system. Are you saying that's the total PCIA?
In terms of what customers in the Monterey Bay within the Monterey Bay Community Power, our customers, they're paying basically on the next 12 months, it's about $100 million.
Okay, and I
towards the
just
PCIA.
want to clarify, we're not trying to get all that $100 million back.
No. I'm just
Okay.
trying to give some context that it's
Okay.
it's a Herculean
It's a
amount
big-
of money.
it's a big
that's
amount.
not in the pockets of our customers. So, in any event, onward and upward. As you folks all know, our JPA goals are kind of imprinted in our DNA in terms of what we're all about to here: reduce emissions, provide competitive and stable rates, as well as develop and launch local energy projects and programs that benefit all types of customers and stakeholders. But we did want to lay out a vision statement that we're going to reform over time, but we just did want to kind of set the roadmap in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, and that is to deploy innovative energy programs that carry out the agency's goals equitably and effectively to MBCB customers through electrification of the transportation and building sectors, as well as to catalyze local development and distributed energy resources. So we feel pretty strong and excited about that vision statement to kind of channel our efforts forward. So I did want to kind of step back a minute before we dive into programs and evaluation and kind of give you the big picture or the 30,000 view. I spent a good 4 years hammering through the state of California, working with a couple other nonprofits doing greenhouse gas accounting training for, I think, something like 250 different local governments. So I kind of know this left, back, and forward. And so I just wanted to kind of show you, because we are a JPA made up of local governments, we want to be in line with what the local governments are trying to do to reduce emissions, fight climate change, and bring better benefit to their communities. So that is kind of rooted in kind of three general sectors, which is solid waste, energy use, and transportation. And then there are a variety of ways that local governments can impact or affect through policies to reduce emissions. And what we found across a lot of different climate action plans that local governments have put forward is they have called out a community choice energy program as one of the fastest, most effective ways to reduce electricity emissions in the built environment and hopefully catalyze the reduction of transportation emissions through zero carbon, hopefully electrified vehicles and whatnot. So it's great to see that we're kind of in lockstep in terms of what the local governments are trying to accomplish as well. I did want to do a quick update and show you again the snapshot. It's great to have the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, who's doing inventories for all of the jurisdictions in the Monterey Bay region. They do it on a 5-year timeline. So they've done it in 2005, 2010, and now 2015. And I think they're going to be doing an update soon. But as you can see, the majority, or not the majority, but transportation does account for 42% of the emissions. Now, that doesn't tell you the whole story, because there was a methodological update with the greenhouse gas accounting network that moved away from this kind of all-encompassing geographical-based emissions accounting to a trip demand, which basically you don't account for the pass-through miles on the freeways anymore. Again, local governments don't have controls on the freeways. They can't institute policies to reduce those emissions. But if you go look at MFAC, which is a California Air Resources Board database, which shows you all the emissions for every air district, county, you name it, that picture gets skewed a lot differently. So I'm just trying to give you some context that we're all working in with different methodologies and different protocols. But I think what we're trying to understand a little better is the big picture about all this, that transportation is that big gorilla in their room that we're trying to address. And again, why is a greenhouse gas important? Why is a greenhouse gas inventory important? Well, as they say, you can't effectively reduce what you can't measure. So it's great to have all this data kind of coming towards us, and us now being the electric utility, we now have a little more control over our electricity data that we can share with our member jurisdictions and also be able to monitor and track that. So it really is a great kind of framework to help inform a variety of different policies and procedures moving forward. And then to give you a little kind of context about what greenhouse gas inventories are in terms of the types. So there are two types. The community is all the emissions or sources, activities that come from homes, businesses, transportation, solid waste, and whatnot. But there's a smaller subset called the government operations inventory, which is what the city of Santa Cruz County, what they own and operate in terms of vehicles, buildings, wastewater treatment plants, you name it. But when you look at the kind of greater picture, a government operations inventory is always somewhere between 2 to 3% of the community's, the greater community's greenhouse gas inventory. And I just kind of on a different note, This is one particular framework they set up in terms of what local governments have control over, but there's kind of a movement around the United States to look at consumption-based inventory practices, which would look at an entire community in terms of the airplane travel, the types of goods and services they buy. So we're really trying to kind of get a grapple about all these kind of moving pieces in terms of, you know, the frameworks that are being presented right now. But rest assured, there's a lot of great work going on to help empower everybody to make the right choices for their home or their business. And then I wanted to kind of land on this last slide before I hand it over to our all-star, Beth Trenchard. The climate action planning process for cities is pretty straightforward. They start with a leadership commitment to develop this. They do a baseline greenhouse gas inventory, which helps to kind of establish targets from there. So how much do we want to reduce in 10, 20, 30 years or 40 years? A lot of these targets are aligned with what the state has in order in terms of reducing emissions below 1990 levels by 80%. That kind of informs the development of the climate action plan. And then implementing the climate action plan is using measures like us, like how is Monterey Bay Community Power reducing electricity emissions, encouraging energy efficiency, encouraging electric vehicles, and so forth. And then finally, we move to monitoring and tracking progress, and that's usually done through subsequent greenhouse gas inventories or tracking individual programs. So I did want to give you that context because we fit into this puzzle in every little kind of segment, but we are a vessel for the local governments to meet these goals. So on that note, I want to kind of hand it over to Beth. In terms of our just presentation in general, we want to go through everything. There's going to be a lot of great stuff to discuss. So I think once we get through the presentation, then we can certainly backtrack and talk about any of the slides that we want. But in terms of us delivering all the information in one comprehensive approach, that's our recommendation.
Okay, very good. We'll try and do that.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Trenchard.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here. Thrilled. Some of you I've been talking to since January about this, so thank you. The reason that JR started off the presentation with our JPA goals is because our programs are designed to support those goals. So that's our starting point with everything we do. I also, you know, before I jump into the programs, I want to kind of embellish what Mr. Hibashi shared. I had several people ask me, what are we supposed to be approving today? For example, there's an EV incentive program where I've got rebates and all kinds of dollar amounts. Those are there as examples. As we get closer and closer to implementation, the market's going to change, everything's going to change. We just want to give you a sense of what it could look like, so keep that in mind. And I will be very clear as I go through the programs on exactly what I'm looking for approval, I promise. Also, I want to take an opportunity to share how unique a situation we are in. Typically, when a CCA launches, they don't have program dollars. Right? They launch and then they work hard and they accumulate funds, they develop a program map, and eventually they're able to implement a program. We, on the other hand, at launch have money to invest into our community and have an incredibly strategic impact right off the bat. This is unheard of. So while moving forward, what you'll see is, well, we're talking today about 1819, but moving forward, we will continue to be bringing programs to you to evaluate. We have a new business development manager who will be starting shortly, who will have all kinds of opportunities he wants to bring to you. So together, as a team, moving forward, we will be creating a 5-year program map. It's just that we're in a very unusual place starting off the bat. So with that, what I'd like to do is first give you a sense of what work we did up to this point, and then where we're going. Then what I'll do is I'll review some of the 1819 programs at a high level and get into more detail so that we'll go through each and every program. So when we first started out, back in March, we put out an RFO for technical advisors. We got 4 bids back and we selected 2. One was the amazing Steve Schmidt on the residential side who helped us. And we also are working with Zoe Elizabeth on the commercial side. Those technical advisors helped us develop a complete list of potential programs. We looked at CCAs, we looked at munis, we looked at the private utilities. We did research, we looked at trends, we did everything we could to pull together every possible program that we thought would tie back to our JPA goals. The next step was we developed evaluation tools so that we could do various what-ifs on the different types of programs. Then we had to develop criteria. The quantitative criteria was really kind of industry standard. Everybody looks at the same thing pretty much, and I'll review that when we get there. On the qualitative side, there's a huge range of the type of variables that the CCAs look at to evaluate for their community. What I did was I talked to, I think, 4 different CCAs, and I looked at what they had, and I came up with what I thought was the most comprehensive and representative approach, and we'll see what you folks think. The next step is we'll be reviewing, obviously with you, this is our first step. This is gonna be a very iterative process. We will have that same review process with the Operations and Policy Board, but you are the starting point for our programs discussions. Whoops. So this is a list of our quantitative and qualitative criteria that we used. Again, on the quantitative side, truly, the focus is on what are the greenhouse gas emission reductions and what does it cost? Because we have an element in our JPA that really focuses on local development, we're hoping that if we could capture what local jobs were created through these programs, that would give us some sense. And I separated financial benefit, Monterey Bay Community Power financial benefit, because while there's a program cost, in many cases, some programs actually provide revenue back to Monterey Bay Community Power. When you have an EV and you charge it, it uses electricity, which creates more revenue, which creates more program dollars. So a virtuous cycle that also offsets some of the costs of the program. On the qualitative side, I know customer benefit sounds obvious, but it was the one comment I got from all of the CCAs is to not lose sight of what you're trying to do. So I put it right up top. Social equity, what I'm trying to capture is, does the program have the opportunity to provide technology access to our low-income community, our underserved community? Demand response, some of the programs offer us an opportunity down the road to offer a demand response program. I'm also looking for opportunities to access third-party funding so that it can extend Monterey Bay Community Power funding. We've also heard clearly from our community that we have to start working closer and closer to community emergency preparedness. So we need to keep that as an end goal of, are we working our way closer to that? And lastly, brand awareness. I know that's not, that's a marketing term, but it's really important, and this is what we're trying to get at. We really want Monterey Bay Community Power to be a recognized, trusted name. And the reason we want that, for multiple reasons, is because ultimately we'd love the opportunity to be able to educate our community about all the things that we care about. I think the aquarium is a great example, right? You have a fabulous name, you've been able to do amazing things in the community, and we'd like to have the same opportunity. So just to kind of summarize, we have these technical advisors, we create a list of programs, we have the criteria, we evaluate the programs. Now we have to figure out, well, do we suggest recommending it in 18-19 or in future years? And how much do we spend on these programs? And these are some of the variables that helped us make that decision. First off, there are programs that we absolutely have to do, like electrifying our building stock. Specifically, we need to have those natural gas hot waters convert to heat pump water heaters to reduce natural gas emissions. But we also know that there are so many barriers to success right now that there's no way we could do a program in 18 and 19 that would be successful and have the kind of impact and participation that we could with some other programs. Key program, but we're going to recommend it for future years once the technology and all the barriers are addressed. And for that program in particular, we have 2 CCAs who've received significant grants to go after that problem. There's also situations where the customer is still figuring out their strategy. When you talk to some of the transit agencies, they know they want to electrify their bus fleet, but they're not sure how yet. They're still figuring it out. So for Monterey Bay Community Power to come in and say, we could offer you storage to help with the demand charges, we could create a special tariff, we could partner funding with you. Those are all things we'll evaluate, but first we have to wait until they've decided on what they're going to do. The third situation that we saw a lot that helped us, again, decide where to place a program in 1819 or beyond was, in many cases, customers are still evaluating the technology. We have a couple examples now of a CCA and PG&E who tried to do a pretty good storage program, and they were both shocked that the participation was so low. And it's not that it's not a good program, it's that the customers are still understanding how best to use the technology. And for those reasons, again, if there are programs that are available that can make a huge impact immediately right now versus programs that are still on the cutting edge, staff's recommendation is to go with the ones that we know will be successful right now. The next phase of that was, how much money do we put into this? You probably noticed that we are spending less than we have budget dollars for. Something unheard of when I was in Silicon Valley, but there's a reason for that. First off, we're starting from zero, so it takes a while to both plan, design, and implement a program. So realistically, to do the programs beginning in fiscal year 18-19, we know that we can't spend all the money. It's just not realistic. We need time to plan and design it. We also know, based on the other CCA's experiences, is typically when you introduce a program for the first time, it's simple, right? You have to make it simple because you're learning a lot and you need to implement something. If you go too complicated, you're not going to be successful. So most programs right out the chute are fairly simple, and it takes a while to build awareness within your community base, so you don't have as high as a participation rate. The second year out, your program gets more robust, more people know about it, and your demand grows. That's what our expectation is as well. And lastly, as I said, we know, I mean, we're evaluating a lot of different opportunities that aren't reflected in this because we just don't have enough information yet. We will. We will be bringing them to you as opportunities, if not for this year, for future years. So, what this graph shows you is, these are all of the programs. They're kind of summarized, but in general, it's all of the programs that we looked at with our technical advisors. The bullets in blue are programs that we think are realistic to implement in 18-19. The bullets in black are programs that we're recommending for future years. If I go a little bit deeper, the programs that we're specifically recommending for this year, the passenger vehicles, that's the EV incentive program. We're recommending the charging station program. We're recommending the Go Local RFO is already on way. We're also suggesting the low-income solar program, which I'll get into. We've already got some complementary funding going, and we're asking for some consulting support. The program.
So can I just ask you to go through those a little more, so we could pick them off your chart? I couldn't keep up. So off the first column.
So passenger vehicles, which is the EV incentive program. And then if you scoot down, level 2 DC fast charger stations, that's the second program we're recommending. Then go over into the other category, local renewable development. We have the RFO, the Go Local RFO. We also have the affordable housing solar program that we're recommending. And then under complementary funding, we already have a deal going there. And of course, we're asking for some consultant support.
Thank you.
So I'm hoping this is a familiar chart. This is what was shown to you last month. It's what was approved by, you reviewed it, and the Policy and Operations Board approved it. It's what we're really looking for from you to support so that we can take the next step and start really focusing on some of the design work on some of these programs. Would it be helpful if I give you a minute to review that, or?
Please.
Okay, so again, we're asking for an EV discount off MSRP that's offered to the entire community. And then we're also asking for additional EV incentives for our underserved community and public agencies. That's about close to 65% of the spending for fiscal year 18-19. The next program is the charging station program. The only reason that's not more money is because it takes a while to plan and actually implement it. The implementation date for that is expected to be July 2019. So the costs really roll into the following year, but all the design work happens this year. The single-family and multi-unit dwelling low-income installations, I'll get into the detail of that in just a bit, but we're expecting the program impact to be about $100,000. We're asking for consulting support for an electrification strategic plan of $150,000. We'd like to do a needs assessment targeted at the agriculture sector. We're estimating about $50,000. And then we have close to $100,000 in both marketing materials and outreach to support these programs. So let's jump into the first program. First off, at a high level, the goal with both the EV incentive and charging station program is to go after the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions and provide access to our entire community by making EV purchase close to the cost of a comparable fuel car. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We believe, and I'll show you in our analysis, we believe that to do this, we really do need incentives for both new and used EVs. Plus, we absolutely need charging station access. Right now, the state has set a goal of 15% EV market share by 2030, or for our Tri-County, that would equate to about 90,000 registered EVs. Today, the Tri-County has about 4,000 registered EVs, just to give a sense of the issue. What I think I'd like to do, I'm just gonna skip to the next chart, and I wanna just walk you through this. I know it's a busy chart. I apologize for that, but I'd like to walk you through my point that I'm trying to make here. Right now, if you look at the column under all customers, right now you'll notice that there are discounts available today. There's a CVRP discount, which is through CARB. There's a clean fuel rebate from PG&E. There's also a pretty significant tax credit. And if you're really lucky and your timing is good, you could also get an MBARD rebate off your EV. If you look at just those rebates, though, and you assume that you want to buy a Nissan Leaf that has an MSRP of $35,000, that gets you to about a $25,000 cost. If you look at the cost of an entry-level fuel-driven car, that's about $15,000 to $18,000. So you can see that for the majority of our community, an EV feels kind of out of reach. When you start looking at the rest of our community and you look specifically at our underserved customers as well as our public agencies, they don't get to take advantage of that tax credit. So purchasing an EV is even further out of their reach, right? It's a tax credit, so if you're a low-income community member, you don't get to take advantage of that, and public agencies or nonprofits. What we're proposing are two things. First off, and I have to say I'm plagiarizing this from Sonoma Clean Power, who has a very successful program called Drive Evergreen. So this is not me being creative, this is me taking advantage of what's already out there. What Sonoma Clean Power discovered was you can negotiate bulk discounts with the EV manufacturers and dealers and get incredible discounts off MSRP. The $10,000 that I have up there is an average that they experienced during their last program. Honestly, I didn't believe it. I thought it was way too crazy, wild. Actually, if you look specifically at the individual EVs, a Leaf averaged a $14,000 bulk discount. The reason the dealers in particular love this deal is because it's free marketing. It's pushing people to their dealership, and the volume of EVs skyrocket relative to the norm without these programs. So they love them and they offer aggressive discounts. The good news with the bulk discount is it wouldn't cost Monterey Bay Community Power anything except staff time. We would be negotiating it. It's the dealer and the manufacturer who provide the discount. When you consider that bulk discount for all of our customers, that gets us closer, much, much closer to the cost of an entry-level Yaris. That would get us down to $14,500, assuming they can't take advantage of the MBARD rebate, which would be another couple $1,000s. And when you consider the savings of driving an EV versus a fuel-based car, between the gas, the oil, fan belts, timing belts, air filters, spark plugs, all of that, that's another $1,300 average per year. So when you look at just the bulk discount and you look at the all customer category, that gets us pretty close. When you start looking at the underserved customers in the public agencies, it's a little bit tougher because they can't take advantage of the most significant advantage, the tax credit. So we're proposing that Monterey Bay Community Power offer an incentive to the underserved. I used $5,000. It's more aggressive than what Sonoma's doing this year. I don't, Richard, do you know what MBARD's doing this year? I don't.
It's up to $3,500
So,
per vehicle.
so $5,000 is still pretty aggressive. I don't know if it's the right number, right? We don't know what kind of bulk discount we can get. There's a lot of unknowns here. I put up $5,000 so that people would have a sense of what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting a rebate that we offer to our underserved community as well as our public agencies who simply can't take advantage of the EV technology today. This is for a new EV. I'm also suggesting an incentive for used EVs. There's a new program that's just been introduced. I don't know much about it. Nobody knows much about it. But the cool thing about it is it's offering $5,000 for either a new or a used EV, which makes an incredible difference because when you look at the used market, none of those incentives that exist on the new side carry over to the used. So that kind of discount also has financing, it has a free charging station, it's an amazing program. So I'll be doing some research on that.
Who's offering that rebate, that program?
CVAP, Clean Vehicle Assistance Program.
So it's at the state.
Yes, it's a state program and it's assumed that it's not well funded and will disappear fast. But I want to do some research. It's truly amazing. It's offering $5,000 rebate plus financing no more than 8%, targeted at the low-income community with a free charging station. It's pretty amazing. So let me quickly review some of the pros and cons of this program. Again, one of the biggest opportunities of this program is really building EV public awareness and acceptance. There's going to be a lot of marketing, a lot of outreach. It's a huge opportunity. It's an opportunity to get to better know our underserved community as we try and reach out to them. There's all kinds of value. It also will result in about 62,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas reduction. That's calculated assuming that our program would be running for 4 years. You take the cars that were sold in those 4 years, you assume they're going to be on the road for 15 years, and that they're replacing fuel-based cars. If all of that happens, give or take, about 62,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas reduction. There's also incremental revenue from all of those electric vehicles that are charging. There are local retail jobs, but they're retail jobs. They're not electricians' jobs, they're more the low-paying retail. This program offers access for our disadvantaged community, and it's an opportunity to use Sonoma Clean Power's operational plan, which means the implementation of this program is so much easier because we've got a blueprint. We know how to do it. The cons for this program is we don't know what the participation rate will be in the first year. It could be low just because we need to build awareness. The program might only include 4 different car models. So low participation in the first year is a bit of a concern. If you look at just the EV program, we know that we'll fall below the 15% market share target. However, I just want to point out the EV program is really in lockstep with the charging station program. And if you assume a certain number of EV adoptions because of the charging station program, we actually get pretty close to the 15% goal. Another con of this program is it really is impossible to know how many customers would take advantage of a rebate who would have bought an EV otherwise. You just can't capture that. And we also know that we'll be handing out EV incentives to customers who ultimately would be leaving our territory. So before I go on to the next program, what I'm really looking for from you for the EV infrastructure, or the EV incentive program, is do you support it? Do you support that we're going after, in particular, the low-income community and separating the public agencies? Do you support the bulk discount? Do you support an incentive? And if you can give me that direction, then what I'll do is go out and do a lot of homework and come back with a recommendation. So I'm gonna move on to the next program, my favorite program.
No partiality there.
No, it's my favorite program. I'm thrilled. This is called the CAL EVIP program, and let me give you some background. First off, I want to reiterate, we can't successfully incent EV adoption unless we have charging station access. It just won't happen. And I don't think Christy's here. She's not here. Christy is here. Has anybody else heard Christy talk about her experience as a EV owner who does not have access to a garage? It is not a pretty picture. She is Superwoman. It is impossible to own an EV and not have access to a garage. Well, not impossible, just very difficult. So how much do we need? The CEC performed a charging station needs assessment for us. And they looked at the Tri-County, and they concluded that to support EV adoption, we need to invest approximately $16 million, or about, give or take, 1,300 charging stations. That's a combination of level 2 and DC fast chargers. The message being, the Tri-County, even after all of MBARD's hard work, because they've made amazing progress, we are still woefully unprepared to support EV ownership. The good news is that the CEC has launched what's called the CAL EVIP program. It's short for California EV Infrastructure Program. And again, because we had program dollars available at the start, staff went after CAL EVIP funding, and we had success. Because of being able to show that we had skin in the game, because MBARD was willing to support the effort and join forces with us, the CEC has awarded the Tri-County $6 million. After that, when you consider our investment, you consider MBARD's investment, that could be upwards of an $11 to $12 million investment in infrastructure over the next several years. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. The other thing that's, I think, really exciting about this will be the first time in California that 3 major agencies have joined forces to offer one program. And the reason that's significant is, if you'll remember in the EV incentive, there were multiple incentives. And when a customer wanted to take advantage of those incentives, first they had to learn about them, and then they had to apply separately to all of those. For this charging station program, there would be one online site for all 3 agencies. There would be one source to apply, one source to receive the funding, one focused marketing message. It's easy for our customer, it's easy to get the message out. That's why this is my favorite program. The other advantage of this program that I find really significant is Monterey Bay Community Power would have the opportunity to really leverage the expertise of MBARD, CEC, CSE, which is an extremely accomplished program administrator. It's an incredible opportunity. Other than being given $6 million, another pro of this program is, again, we know that we have to have an EV infrastructure if we want to support EV adoption. Because we are installing charging stations, that will further reduce greenhouse gas emissions because it will bring EVs. The assumption, and this is a big assumption, but we believe it could result in about 40 one-time electrician positions to install these charging stations. There's a lot of future demand response potential with charging stations. It's a scalable program. It will grow quickly. Really key is we need level 2 charging station installations at multi-unit dwellings. Ask Christy. And this is an opportunity to do that. It's also important because we know that over time we're going to have to incent charging during the day. where the clean electricity is generated, and getting them installed at work sites is key. The biggest con with this program is it's really difficult to quantify the program's benefits. We don't know how many EVs will be purchased because we have charging stations installed. We just know that we need charging stations to support EV adoption. One concern is that we are on the cutting edge of technology. As EV ranges get longer, charging behaviors change. It's very possible, if we don't select the right site, if the payment structure for the customer using it isn't just right, we do have a risk of stranded assets.
Can I also thank you, just about upkeep of these EV sites once they're implemented?
Haven't gotten there yet. It's a good question, yeah, I haven't gotten there yet.
We've gotten there.
What's that?
We've gotten there. There's difficulty. A lot of companies change ownership and so forth, and actually we have a lot of stranded EV charging stations that we've helped install. So, and the technology is rapidly changing, and so that's why we see consolidation in the marketplace as well. So it is a challenge, but once you have something there, it's easy to upgrade as long as you've got a vendor willing to do that.
The Cal EVIP program, again, this is being driven through the CEC, so we're following their timing. You will all, I think you all already probably received a notice for the October 4th Cal EVIP workshop. That'll be in Salinas on October 4th. Over the next couple months, Monterey Bay Community Power as well as MVARD will be working on co-funding agreements, and we'll be bringing those forward with you so you can see what we're doing. By January, we expect the program to be finalized. That means that the equipment will be selected, the rebates will be determined, and some really interesting discussions around how we ensure that charging stations that are installed in disadvantaged communities really benefits our community. And we can talk about that a little further at the next meeting. By April, June, we expect to have marketing outreach and kickoff. And then by July 2019, we expect the program to go live. I'm going to just skip the Go Local because we've really already had that conversation, and talk a little bit about the Affordable Housing Energy Program. And I apologize, I just shortened that because otherwise it was a lot of words. What this program is it's really looking at providing solar on single-family affordable homes as well as multi-unit dwelling affordable homes. The objective of this program is to reduce electricity costs for our underserved community. And we have an opportunity, especially on the MUDs, to not only put solar on those, but to install charging stations and potentially storage in affordable housing MUDs. The huge, let me finish with the description. The funding for this, what we'd like to do is we'd like to issue an RFO. We would do one for the single-family homes, probably a separate one for multi-unit dwelling. And we'd like to leverage state funding. SASH is for single-family, solar on single-family. SOMA is for multi-unit, solar on multi-unit. The installer can leverage that state funding. The difference we're proposing is made up by MB Green dollars. And anything that MB Green dollars doesn't cover would fall in programs. Biggest pro of this would be a significant financial benefit to our underserved community. It provides Monterey Bay Community Power with the opportunity to identify affordable housing MUD owners. Typically, vendors don't have access to this group of owners. They're very difficult to reach. So if we can work with a developer who already has expertise with SOMA funding and knows these owners, it's a big win for us to get some access. And it would provide an opportunity for staff to get, on a very small scale, some storage and charging station experience. The disadvantage is for those single-family homes that are solar only, we know that the solar generation alone reduces load and it contributes to the duct curve. We also know that for the MUD installations, every MUD is going to be different, so there's a risk with cost. There's an unpredictability there that will be difficult. And for instance, when we were working with Grid Alternatives to kind of get a sense of what this program could look like, Grid Alternatives they work with volunteers and focus on job training. So the job impact is minimal. Okay, last one. This is our consulting request. Really what we're doing here is we're asking for a lot of information. We want to figure out how best do we leverage all the programs in all of those different segments to best benefit our customers in Monterey Bay Community Power, all while we're working towards that community emergency preparedness. We want forecasted data and trends, cost-benefit analysis, alternate renewable and DER resources. We're requesting identification of current and future areas of inadequate infrastructure, electricity access. We need data, and that's what this request is all about. With that, I'm just going to do a quick overview. I know it's difficult to look at 1 year in isolation, so I'm just trying to give you a sense of, well, what could that look like over a 5-year period? What I want you to take away from this, and sorry, it's a little busy. The stacked bars represent each of the program types. So there's transportation, building electrification, storage, go local, and then the line represents the amount of accumulated budget dollars that we have not spent. So I just want you to see the comparison. I'd like you to see that you'll see in 18-19 the majority of the spending is on the EV incentive program, and then that grows as we do the charging station program through the end of 21-22. And then as that ends, you'll notice that building electrification takes off. The Go Local, I've got a placeholder there. I started out with 500,000 because I know it'll take a while to develop, and then I've kept it at 1.2 million throughout the rest of the year. And then the top bar reflects our affordable housing solar as well as our marketing dollars.
Excuse me, Ms. Trenchard, was that the same figure that was in the agenda package?
Which one?
Looks like that one right there, attachment 3, except for the line. Are those the same numbers? No, they're not. They must be different.
I'm sorry, I'm not following
There's
what you're
program
comparing it to.
spending and budget base case spending. I don't have a page number, but it's called attachment 3 in the in this agenda item. So if I can tell it's not the same because 246. Well, you can see at the last year it's still going up. So I just want to.
I believe it's the same. 5.8, 6.1.
So again, there's no page number. You're looking at attachment 3.
I am.
Okay, but look at the last year, 2023-23.
So that's 2.9 here in blue, and then in the attachment it's 2.9.
It goes down.
It goes down in that
goes up.
last year, and this clearly is going up. That's why I can tell visually it's not the same.
It's because, I think it's because the unspent revenue isn't shown on this. Right?
So you're depicting it differently.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So,
I am depicting. Yes, I am depicting it.
okay.
You're right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
All right. So this is very good. Thank you.
I won't go through the details of the timeline, but what I'm really trying to share here is, as we get updates from you, I'll go away and work it, and then I come back with a recommendation. And it'll be true for 18-19. It'll be true from a design all the way through to implementation. And it will be true as we bring forward new opportunities and we start to develop our future roadmap, our 5-year program roadmap. So that's the goal. I've asked JR to do a summary for me. What did I forget? I'm counting on you.
Okay.
I have to say that was excellent.
Yeah, you can
okay.
close up. Yeah.
Okay,
close.
all right.
You pitched a
All right.
perfect game.
Okay. All right, so what I'm asking for in 2018-19 is, again, the EV incentive program and the charging station program together is an impactful combination of programs. We would do the EV incentive first and immediately follow on with charging station installations. The Go Local, we'll hear more about in November. The affordable housing solar program, I think, has a lot of potential. I've only worked one-on-one with Grid to get a sense of it. I think if we were to do an RFO and put it out to some solar developers, we could get some interesting opportunities, and I love the opportunity of being able to learn more about SASH and SOMA funding and how to make all that work. We need data, and that's why we're asking for some consultation support, in particular to try and work closer towards an electrification strategic plan. As we move forward into 1920, we know we will do a building electrification pilot. We just don't know what it looks like yet. We also know that a storage pilot will be critical. We're looking at additional rebates for qualified customers. We don't know. We don't have a lot of information around that. It kind of addresses some of the concerns we've heard of can you do something special for those customers who are truly underserved. My point being there, we're doing a lot of work around both identifying the underserved, understanding where they are, how to reach them, and start to develop programs that might address their specific needs. We're also evaluating the public surcharge program. I don't want to get into too much detail about that, but it's an opportunity that would allow us to have access to some funding that right now PG&E uses for many energy efficiency programs.
It would basically be taking over the administration of the public good charges.
Yes. We're evaluating that. Not that we would do it, but we're evaluating it. In following years, we will be building, we will really be building electrification. The natural gas emissions from the building sector is significant, and we are being told that it's actually underreported and that number is going to grow. So that's something we know we'll be focused on. We know storage will be big. We just don't know if it will be primarily to reduce demand charges. We're not sure. So is that me?
No, go right ahead.
Demand response is something we're evaluating. It depends. We're not sure if it's the right thing to do. Some CCAs are focusing actually on demand response on the residential side. Others are focusing on the commercial side. There's a lot going on in the industry. If anybody saw what Honda's doing, as well as EV2Go, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the demand response world that we'll be evaluating. Community solar, we don't know if we can do it, but we have an incredible opportunity given our unique data service provider. And we want to explore it to see if that's a possibility. We will continue to focus on external funding, and we will continue looking for opportunities to support our underserved community. That's all I got.
Ms. Trenchard, I have to say, I think that was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
You covered a lot of ground. You've answered a lot of my questions, I know. But that doesn't mean there still won't be questions.
Yes.
So I thank you very much for that presentation. I'm going to ask my council now if they'd like to dive into this a little bit deeper, and if anyone has any specific questions they'd like to go with. Mr. Stedman, I'll start with you.
So I agree. Excellent presentation. I just have a few questions relative to the budget for these programs. I'm looking at I guess it's evaluated FY 2018-2019 program, attachment 2, and is that the annual cost? So you're going to be putting $3.3 million into EVs this year?
Sorry, I'm just looking at the.
It's over 3 years, I think.
Oh, yes, that's we're assuming that the EV incentive program will be a 3-year program, $825,000 each year.
Okay, it just says 2018, 2019 at the top, so I was wondering.
Yes.
So the first year, and that's depicted on the stacked chart. So what was the amount that was going to be going in?
$825,000, I believe. Let me make sure I'm right.
And does that represent total cost of the program, or is
Yes.
or
Yes,
So that
that is-
includes labor and administrative costs and everything as well? Okay.
Yes.
All-in costs. Mr. Groot. Oh, wait. Go. A continuation?
Yeah, just one more
Sure.
comment. You know, we've worked with trying to get dealers to add discounts, and it's very difficult in this area. We're sort of an island where they say go to the Bay Area and so forth, and I know our board has been very interested in keeping these dollars local, although the tax money does come back to us. The other thing is that the dealerships make almost 50% of their revenue on performing maintenance costs for the fueled vehicles.
Yep.
So they're very reluctant to you know, be high volume dealers of electric vehicles, and it sounds like you already know that, but we've run into that wall as well. So
There's
that's-
another downside to electric vehicles from a dealer's perspective too.
Absolutely.
They don't really want to replace your battery when that comes time. They want you to buy a new vehicle.
Absolutely.
Mr. Groot.
So thank you. One of my questions was the same as what Richard just asked, so I appreciate that. On the EV program, which is I'm very supportive of, is there a requirement that the EV replaces a gas vehicle, or how is that going to work?
No, when we looked at what Sonoma did, they found that in probably 3/4 of the cases, the EV was purchased and augmented an existing fuel-based car. So we're afraid that if we force a one-on-one, you know, some people need multiple cars. So if we're getting something that's at least driving less fuel, that's the hope.
Okay, that makes sense. And then my other question is, on that program, if you're targeting the underserved or underprivileged communities, I assume that it's going to be bilingual.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Yes.
Is it one of the things that I see in our communities is that there's too many cars. Too many cars. All the highways are getting flooded. They get full. They're very slow. The commute is very slow. Is there a way of creating a system that we can electrify and move people faster? That we can project to the future?
Well, I can meet you halfway there. What I do think we could do is do something really creative with EV sharing, which would provide access to especially our underserved community, where effectively there's a program in San Francisco called Karma, where you can basically rent an EV by the hour, $6 for whenever. And there are also programs that prioritize their EVs at apartment complexes so that people, when they need an EV, can get it. So I think that's a real opportunity. The problem is today, most of those programs are in very dense urban areas where there's lots of charging stations. So right now, nobody would talk to us because we don't have the charging stations, but I'm hopeful that we can get something creative in the future once we have some charging station access.
And one other one, Robert, he sent this letter, and he's talking about, you know, the county is the greatest user of cars, and you think it will be a good idea for government agencies to start switching gas into EV and create a bigger EV, you know, there will be a large amount of cars that you can take away from the roads, and you can put more electric cars. Is it possible to work with local government agencies?
Part of the EV incentive program would focus on both the underserved and then also have a special rebate for public agencies, which would include government agencies, nonprofits, schools. So to get as many of those agencies that support the entire community, EVs, absolutely.
Thank you.
Will these programs be available, for instance, the EV and the charging to Monterey Bay Clean Power employees? Because we'd like you to lead by example, you know.
Well, if they live here, of course.
Okay, absolutely.
Just to also add to it that we don't have a program for people who earn good money. The program that we have is for underserved communities as well as governmental agencies. So to the extent that we keep paying our folks good compensation, then they're not likely to be able to get some of that.
They don't need the incentive, is what you're saying.
Yeah, unless they're willing to take a cut in pay, a really significant cut in pay.
Well, I would certainly encourage all of your employees, as well as all of my fellow council members, to really look at looking at an electric vehicle. Mr. Kepler.
I've got a number of quick questions. And Richard, you might be able to help out with this, but when you were talking about the incentive for cars, one of my concerns on a couple of levels with the layered financing is that it isn't always efficient. And in terms of people getting incentives for electric vehicles, do you know if the Air Board has ever talked to the state about doing a one-stop shopping on the state's website so that they could sign up for all the incentives in one place?
That's a really good idea, but the funding sources are so diverse that would be really hard to do, and we don't know from year to year whether or not that's going to continue. We sort of think the tax credit's going to go away soon as well. So that's a great idea, but I think to maybe work it a little closer to home, it would be probably really beneficial if we got together, the Air District with Community Power, and we leverage and consolidate our funding so there's not all these different rebates people have to shop and get, and we don't like to call them rebates again, but the incentive packages. And then I just would add too that we are giving $10,000 to cities and government entities for the purchase of electric vehicles, so that we're slowly, and they are required to change out the fuel-driven vehicle from whether it's a county or city or what have you.
Those are government cars, not private cars, right?
Government cars,
Yeah.
yes, government fleets.
Mr. Kaplan, you got more?
Yeah. What's the schedule for getting a board approval for the first funding that you're asking for a recommendation on here? And is that going to be an ops board decision or a policy board decision?
The 1.3 million has already been approved.
Yeah, it's in the budget. All the program dollars have been approved during the budget process.
The program dollars are approved, but how they're specifically expended, has that already been approved also?
I believe that's why we're here, is to start talking about the specifics of how we're going to carry out the programs and get your input and go from there.
Right. So will you, after getting our input, do you still need to go back? You don't need to go back for any further board approval. You can just implement based on the budget. Is that your assumption?
Only to the extent that we're going to spend any more than $100,000 on a contract or a program or something, we're going to have to go back to the operations board to let them know that that's what we are doing. If we have to actually pay somebody more than $100,000, if we have to sign a contract that has a value of more than $100,000, we need to go back to the board.
Okay. So at some point, we're going to make a recommendation, and it's going to go to ops board for approval then on the programs we're talking about here?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And the MB Green dollars that you were talking about using for one of the programs, do you have an estimate for how much money that will be?
No, short answer. What's going on now is since we just launched, we really haven't had an opportunity to really market those programs. So we don't have a sense of where it's going to end up. We know that, at least last time I looked, there were more people contributing their rebates to MB Green than MB Share.
And do we have any idea from other CCEs that have done similar things, what kind of participation they've gotten?
Well, in terms of our programs, we're completely unique. In terms of participation rates, I'm not sure what would be comparable. Maybe some of the...
I can't answer that because, as Beth put it, this is a very unique program. What we are doing, however, is we are looking into the offers that we're making, whether the MB Share or the MB Green, and in 1 year from now, we will look at it again to see how successful it is. If it happens that we have to spend twice as much money on marketing as we will get from those programs, then most likely we'll just cancel it and start another program. That probably more proven in other CCAs.
So I'm a big EV fan and supportive of the direction, and especially supporting low-income entry into that market. Although I think when you look at the numbers, in the short term, it doesn't have a big greenhouse gas impact, but it's building a momentum of a gradual change and acceptance. But I wonder about looking at, if you've looked at other programs through mass transit, trying to get more people during commutes, especially off the highway, into buses through some sort of a voucher program?
We have not. I think our next focus to really go after, again, big impact is looking at our transit and school buses and trying to get those diesels off the road.
Right, but if people aren't riding those electric buses, it's not going to really, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are plenty other agencies that I'm sure we can work with in order for us to contribute to help switch the buses and the cars into electric, while other agencies will be figuring out ways to get people into those buses. We would love to do everything, but we're just gonna have to focus on the things that somehow has the word electricity in the middle of it.
Has what in the middle?
Electricity.
Electricity.
And I just want to make one more comment, and this isn't a critique of what you've done at all. I think it's a great menu of possible future programs with some specific short-term things. But I just wanted to share with the rest of the council. My concern is that we keep our focus on generation on some level. And there's a lot of other agencies that do a lot of these other programs we're talking about. It doesn't mean it's bad for us to do them, but I don't want to see us doing those at the expense of focusing on changing generation, which is a global thing. I mean, we're not buying fossil power now, but we're in a bigger market, and particularly, and that's in the discussion that Beth brought forward, is it seems like our role in storage might be more primary than a lot of the other agencies. That'll be part of it's not generation, but it's part of providing power. But I think that sort of general topic of overall long-term strategy is something that I hope we're talking about at every meeting here, because I think all of us are just trying to get our hands around those bigger issues of how we approach this.
So if I understood you correctly, you mean you want to see electrical generation transform from fossil fuels to renewable,
right?
And that's the highest priority,
right? I mean, it's good to electrify the economy. We have to do that, but if we don't have fossil-free electricity to power that, then we're not really going to be where we need to be.
Yeah, I think just to quick comment that storage is incredibly important. It's one of the things that we are pushing for very hard. And one of the things that happened today, and I apologize, I forgot to share with you, is that the CPUC put an order out that seemed to indicate that they are very supportive of Pacific Gas and Electric put in 560 megawatt worth of storage right here in Moss Landing. And this is something that we have supported. Perhaps Cal CCA took an opposition stand to it, but we did support it, and we continue to support it because I think that storage is incredibly important, and we're not going to be able to electrify the grid unless we promote a lot more storage than what we have today.
And we do have to differentiate between maybe the storage you're talking about at the residential and commercial level versus the bulk storage.
No, I mean,
because that's completely out of reach for our organization in terms of cost.
I should add that we will be paying part of that storage cost that PG&E will be building, because the cost of it is going to be spread to everybody. And we, along with everybody else in the CCE world, will be paying part of the cost. But I think that's is a small contribution that we need to be making in order to move into.
As a PCIA charge, how would we be paying for part of that?
I think they call it the CAM, the capacity allocation methodology. Basically, anything that is above market, that such as building storage, which is going to be costly. Basically, PG&E says that the allocation, we are building this in order to support the reliability of the grid, and therefore everybody that's on a grid, including the CCAs and the DAs, need to pay for it. So we will end up getting an allocation of that capacity that we can use for our resource adequacy, but we're also going to pay for it.
This all starts getting pretty complicated. And it's interesting. So that's part of the resource adequacy. You will get to count that as part of as a load-serving entity, as part of our resource adequacy?
That's correct, yes.
Interesting. I think what's happening is our local investor-owned utility is beginning to figure out that they're not going to be able to rate base a lot of new generating capacity. So they're getting on the train that's leaving the station on energy storage, rate basing would you say 480 megawatts?
I believe it's 560.
560
Or thereabouts,
megawatts of storage is a lot of rate base that's going to get added to their system for the next. That's how they make money, as return on their rate base.
I should add that only this is 4 different systems that will add up to 560 megawatt. Only one of them will be owned by PG&E. The other 3 are owned by other
IOUs.
third parties. Yes, not IOUs, third parties.
Oh,
Like Calpine and so on.
that's right. Because I think they're limited to 50%. They can only own 50% of the storage that gets added on the system. I think it's something like that from the original PUC decision. Do you have more comments, Mr.
No,
Capone?
thank you.
No, that's great.
Do you mind if I
Absolutely.
say something? So Beth, this is really refreshing to see. Nice job on it. After having nothing against Angela, but the Brown Act and going through the bylaws, this is really what it's all about. So it's good to see this. It's very refreshing. There's also some more opportunities. I know we have some in the audience. We have some Monterey Bay Electric Vehicle Alliance people. So for further collaboration, it's great that you're working with MBARD, but we have Ambiva in the area too. PG&E is going to be deploying. They are deploying EV charging stations. So there's an opportunity to work with them on that. And then there's also the VW settlement agreement. So trying to strategize where this has been something that we've been working on for a long time, right? Where do these EV charging stations go? Trying to cluster them and such and make them easy to find and accessible. There's a lot of opportunity there and a lot of especially for collaboration. So hopefully you'll take that into consideration as well. I was curious on if there. So I'm glad that board member Capron asked the question about what are we doing here, and then where does that lead to with the operations board. But I'm also curious about having an opportunity for the public to participate in this process and developing these programs. And so and I don't know if it's something that we can make a recommendation on or if that goes to operations board for consideration, but to have like listening sessions or some way for the public to be able to provide input on things that they'd like to see, programs they'd like to develop, because I'm sure there's a lot of good ideas that are out there. And so just creating a venue for them to do that. So that would be something I'd like to see.
Mr. Hartman, I agree. I think that's an excellent comment, and I would endorse that one as well. And so we'll need to figure out what's the best way to do that. Stay within the provisions of the Brown Act, et cetera, but maybe a study session of some kind where staff could present in more detail. We could have more discussion amongst ourselves as in an informal way, since we wouldn't be making any decisions. It would give us a chance to ask a lot more questions and get a lot more community involvement. So I'm just throwing that out there, maybe thinking out loud that maybe a Saturday, that's the kind of thing that if you'd be willing to give up your time, that could be very fruitful. And we'd give the community a lot of notice on that so that they could be there as well. Be a lot of time to I know Mr. Groot loves this because he spent the entire day today doing the same sort of thing. You don't have to comment. Mr. Hartman, any more comments?
No, that's all I have. Thank you.
Do you mind if I respond to one of them?
Please, absolutely. I think he wants you to respond.
The PG&E infrastructure program is an awesome program. And when you look at where they've had success, it's been in these very dense urban areas. The purpose of Cali VIP was actually created to address areas like us, where we aren't as dense. The idea of putting in 10 contiguous charging stations, I mean, maybe if I really search, I can find a few in our 3 counties. There just aren't many. The beauty of Cali VIP is you can do 1 or 2 charging installations at work sites. So the whole purpose of Cali VIP was to address those territories that can't take advantage of the PG&E charging station program. And regarding MVIVA, we're trying to work very closely with Ecology Action. We adore them. We're trying to make some connections there. We actually just went out to lunch with them a couple weeks ago. So we're making that happen. We're making as many connections as possible as we can with our community. Thank you.
Please, Mr. Osmer.
Thank you. I didn't want to let JR off the hook. I had a question about JR's part, and that's the part that you led with. Is you referred to the climate plans, climate action plans of the cities and entities. It was a little bit of a red light for me. Is how is MBCP going to help with those? In other words, how do you meter out the impact? And of course, this comes from lots of division. We're not a great example. We're not a model of regional cooperation. And for example, the housing plan, how the state housing plan allocates housing units has in the past been the subject of lawsuits. So how's that? Do you have any idea of how that's going to work, or do you have any thoughts about it at all at this point?
So thank you.
That's a good enough
Thank you,
answer. Now I know how there
Councilmember
is to
Osmer. So if I can unpack that. So the first question was how the climate action plan. How does MBCP fit into being a vehicle for the climate action planning process?
Really, when it comes down to measurement, is at a point you're going to get to measurements, how are you going to contribute to the achievement of those individual goals of all the cities? And
great question. And I know my long esteemed colleague from the city of Santa Cruz will smile at this. So emission factors, so they're based off of carbon intensity. So the way the state has put together their emission factors right now, within each IOU, they have a market base. So they look at all the power supply they have. There's a carbon intensity behind each one. You look at how many megawatts you procured for that, and then you arrive at a figure, what they call pounds per megawatt hour. And you tie that to the EPA's E-grid for CH4 and N2O. Those are other 2 greenhouse gas emissions. Sorry, I'm getting way too technical. It rounds out to something called carbon dioxide equivalent. And so because we have a carbon-free, power supply, that factor becomes virtually 0, whereas PG&E, last time I checked, was like 294. So if you were to tag all the kilowatt hours associated with PG&E power supply, and then you tag all of our kilowatt hours with our power supply, you see this kind of Herculean drop in electricity emissions. And so the interesting thing about that is what makes it a little tricky is about the transportation sector, is because unless there are commercial sites or residential customers who have like a standalone meter that's reading the kilowatt hours, that's charging the vehicle, all of the kind of embedded transportation kilowatt hours are now in the residential and commercial sector. But you see that kind of in a reduction and hopefully in gasoline consumption or diesel consumption on the kind of greater transportation profile. And then around the general plan?
Yeah, that's it sort of answers the question. I just wanted to bring it up really as a matter of attention for the future. Is that if there's a chance to fight with each other, the cities and counties usually take that opportunity. So, I did have some observations on the EV. I think it's a great program, and I'm afraid I hope there'll be some flexibility in the income guidelines. When you look at people who qualify for FARA, the PG&E reduced rate program, is people who qualify have to earn less than $52,000 in a household of 3. So, you know, how that fits in with, you know, that household buying an electric vehicle is very, very tough. So, so I hope that maybe the target is a little bit higher income to start with. Also, I think making it higher and then having a goal to serve lower income people will make it more attractive as the charging infrastructure gets done. Is that, you know, you don't see too many charging stations outside of laundromats, for example. You know, I think as the infrastructure grows, then it'll give it a better chance for low-income people who qualify for CARE and FARA might be able to afford them.
Yes, right now the CARE and FARA is the easiest way for somebody like Monterey Bay Community Power to identify low income. But our agency is working very closely with Dennis so that we can broaden our reach and further identify the underserved. And we'll probably work with you to serve as the income verifier and then take the information from you so we can incorporate them into our database.
When you say broaden your reach, you mean to expand the group beyond that threshold to a higher threshold of some kind?
I think we'd have to agree on what the income level is. We'd look at what CARE and FARA is today and have to agree as a group on how do we want to identify this community, and then we have resources that would allow us to access addresses with those qualifications.
Because that really is just data, right? You can do anything you want with it. You can say to 150% of that level or something as well.
Yes,
would qualify.
Different levels that you define low income as you may.
As an example, for instance, when we're working with the CEC and the charging stations, the CEC has agreed that rather than use the formal DAC requirement, which really reduces...
What's DAC?
It stands for Disadvantaged Community.
Thank
it's
you.
Based on a tool called CalEnviro 3.0, and it requires people to be in a 75% or above percentile. For our 3 counties, that's like maybe 5 zip codes. It's nothing. It really reduces the number of people who are eligible. The CEC is considering allowing us to drop that from 75% top percentile to 50% top percentile, which drastically increases the number of people who would potentially qualify for those programs.
Yeah, that's the one downside, I think, when you work multi-agency is somebody sets a criteria or a level that you have to live with and that doesn't work for your community.
Yeah.
That's always challenging. Mr. Caprone, you want to say
I just
something?
had a quick comment. I think I wouldn't want to see us do away with the lower income, but I think having a graduated approach is good, because also there's otherwise, you know, there's people who are of means who can get the tax credits and can afford an electric car, and there's people who have very little money who really need a lot of help. And then if the people in the middle or you know, just one step above the low income families don't have any help, then they're sort of left out in the cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, if I could just add to this a little bit, you know, having purchased a Leaf myself about 6 or 7 years ago, in fact, I have a lot of things to add with regard to what you described in your programs, including the complexity. I remember having a binder trying to figure out all the different paperwork I had to file and everything in order to, you know, get my rebates and all the stickers and all those kinds of, but many homes need a new service to put in that level 2 charger as well, and there's additional costs there. But the thing I really wanted to add was I just had to replace the batteries in mine. It's old enough now that these electric vehicles, we have to think of them differently. They're not expendable. These are going to last 1 million miles. They're like flashlights, but you got to change the batteries every once in a while. And everybody goes, "Oh my God, how much does that cost?" Well, it doesn't matter. I never asked that when I change the batteries in my flashlight, but I know I never have to do anything else with that flashlight. It never goes in for anything else for any other kind of maintenance or repair except for maybe eventually brakes and obviously tires. So I was wondering on your program when you talked about used vehicles, first of all, I think the resale value is way too high. I couldn't possibly get $12,000 for my old Leaf. And I'm wondering if the incentive should be tied to that battery replacement, because there's going to be more of these used vehicles on the market. Dealers don't like this idea. I can tell you that. They want to see those 7-8-year-old electric vehicles retired, but they're going to last for they're going to last a long time. But what we need to also do is provide incentives for those resales, because you can go buy a used Leaf on the market for probably as little as $8,000, but you're probably going to need to replace the batteries at a cost of about $5,000. So you still need to have a substantial incentive around that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a tremendous opportunity in the used electric vehicle market, not necessarily for Teslas, but these Leafs are going to become more available if you had some incentive around replacing the batteries. So I just throw that out as an idea to think about. And you've got it. I saw it in your chart. So
All right, I'll give that some thought, put some research into it.
just a little more thought about
Yep.
that. I know you had asked me earlier on the rate structures and everything, and I even put in a second meter because I wanted to know how much my electric vehicle is doing. I'm probably the only person that in the state that has 2 meters on his car, so I can keep track of what I'm using, but I just didn't really trust the PUC to get the rate structure right. That's why I did it that way. I'm sorry, Mr. Caprone, did you have some more, or
No,
Mr.
that was it.
Osmer?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Coach, so on the agenda item, it says it's a consideration item, not an action item. What
Wait.
what is
I
it?
thought it said action.
I think it says action.
Yeah, we're
So
on.
looking at number
Oh,
8.
9 is consideration.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is it? What are you looking for exactly?
Let's see.
I think that we always should look at the recommendation in the staff report, and that's pretty much what we are asking for.
A recommendation on the staff report.
Yes.
I have a few comments I'd like to add before we get to that, however. First of all, as I said earlier, I think this presentation went a long way in addressing my questions and really helped me to understand better that there is some more effort behind the quantification or the metrics that are involved that I didn't really pick up as I read this. Well, I shouldn't say it that way, that I didn't pick as much up as I wanted, and to understand some of the barriers that you explained and how some programs aren't ready. That all makes sense now. It didn't come across. And I agree that I think you've picked some really good and interesting programs to get started with, kind of some surefire programs, ones that we have some history and knowledge of through other CCAs. And so let's see, specifically, well, I gave you that example on the electric vehicle, my suggestion on the used vehicle, and this Cal EV VIP, I'm sorry, California EV IP. We always had this problem trying to do programs at the Energy Commission, the chicken versus the egg. Do you sell the cars first and then create the demand for the charging, or vice versa? And I think you're absolutely right. You've got to do both in parallel. It's been amazing to me how many more chargers have been put on the system in the last 6 or 8 years. But I think there is a dearth of adequate charging in these 3 counties, and certainly at the residential level. And it's always a big challenge at the multi-dwelling level. In fact, my question is, have you sorted out how you do the metering for that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm not actually let Richard speak to that because he can probably speak to it much better than I can.
So I don't have to have the answer. I just want to know, has that been all thought out? Has that been worked out? Does it work easily to do the metering at a multi-dwelling? Because somebody's got to pay for the electricity.
Yeah, it can be done. It's
Okay.
it's not a big issue, yeah.
Okay.
In many cases, what we've seen for, especially the multi-unit condos, is it's an opportunity for, in some cases, the association to make some money on the charging station
Because
infrastructure.
you pay as you go.
Exactly.
Got it. It's not like in a residential where you just come home, plug it in.
Exactly.
Well, I think it's just a tremendous program the way you've outlined it with the leverage of the additional funding, and the whole idea of having a single contact for the customer is wonderful as well. That looking at it from the point of view of the customer and the ease of use is a marvelous idea. Okay. On the affordable housing energy program, of course, I think it's interesting. This is counterintuitive. We've always thought that the kinds of PV incentive programs are always going to benefit those that can afford to put in PV programs. It's going to benefit the wealthy. Well, great. Let them put money towards the generation of electricity. You know, it kind of that benefits everybody to some extent. But I think it's fantastic to take this counterintuitive approach and offer this kind of opportunity for low-income housing. The difficulty, or low-income individuals, the difficulty will be, as you say, is how do you let them know? So my question is, are these going to be done as mailings? Are we allowed to put adders or mailings in the bill that PG&E sends out? How do you notify your customers?
I think we are working on a marketing and a communication program. At the same time, we're trying to put the program together. But generally, we have been able to leverage the other agencies, the agencies that we serve. We use their bill stuffers for the water utility bill, for example, and so on. We can't tap into PG&E's bill and add anything to it. We're just not allowed to do it. So we basically just go to water agencies, wastewater agencies, and work with them on and put some of that information into the bill stuffers. Besides, I think we're in about 150 different events in the last 7 months, and every event just about will be able to tout those programs.
So I think I'd conclude with my, thank you very much. I think I should conclude with my general comment that the program ramp up is obviously going to take a while, and I can appreciate that now, seeing what's going on and how revenue will be made more available for these programs. And I think I also understand better now how some of this work is really already begun in parallel, because this council's only been around a few months. Of course, we'd like to have the opportunity to see and comment early on these programs as they come, and I think you've given us the indication that we will be seeing more and kind of, in fact, Mr. Hibashi said before the meeting you can expect something about every month that we'll be seeing, and that's tremendous. I think the one comment that I would add that I hope you'll take to heart is in anticipation of the questions that we'll get from council members, we're going to want to see metrics. I think they're going to need information to evaluate the effectiveness, cost effectiveness, the GHG reduction per dollar that's being spent, the number of jobs that are being created, and who's going to benefit by even geographical location within the counties and income level. To the extent that you can, or make projections, I'm just trying to anticipate that I think that's the kind of thing that this council is going to want to see, so we can help make some determinations. What's the best way to be spending these dollars?
Absolutely, and we do
So
have.
if that's outside our range as a council, I'd understand it, but I would think at least somebody needs to see that at the policy that's making the decision, and hopefully it would start here. Sorry, go ahead, Ms. Trenchard.
Oh, no, absolutely, and we included it in the attachment. I just chose not to review it today. If you'd like to, I'm happy to. We do have the metrics. I don't know if you recall it. It's in the staff report.
I got a
attachment.
sense that you've got it, and that's what made me feel so much better about all this when you went through your presentation. But I guess I would turn to my council members and ask, do you agree with that you're going to want to see more metrics and information in future presentations, or is that too detailed for us?
No, I think it's important that we have those metrics and understand if we're spending the dollars in the right place. And if one of these programs fails to catch on, I think we should have the ability to recommend that those dollars move to another program that is making a difference. So yes, I think metrics are extremely important.
And I can see that even in the last few weeks, you've probably pulled together more information. So give it to us in real time. That's fine.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Caprone.
I would just say that the metrics that you provided are great. I think they're focused on, actually you had a bunch of criteria in there, but the ones that were quantified were greenhouse gas reduction. I think the challenge is there's other values we want to promote, and it's going to be difficult, and we should work on it, but difficult to how we're going to quantify those other values also.
Okay, so,
One more comment. I'm still, I think I understand, but I'm not crystal clear that your staff report covers some more concrete early programs for the next year, basically, and then talks in less specific terms about possible programs in the future. So, in approving the staff report, which specific programs are we concretely approving, and which ones are future possibilities?
I'm just gonna put this one page up here that might.
Or are you actually looking for us to basically endorse this staff report at this point? Because we're not doing any prioritization other than it seems to me, based upon the discussion I've heard, we're not prioritizing any of these one over another.
No, I'm asking for you to support the proposed fiscal year 2018-19 initiatives, which came to 1.3 million.
Well, we want to see that number much higher than 1.3 million.
I'll work on that.
So 1.2 million, so I thought we can spend 5.8.
Yes, I am spending much less than budget. It's going to take time to plan, design, and then implement programs. So the charging station program, for instance, wouldn't be implemented until July 2019, just because it's going to take so long for the planning and design. So by the time we implement it, the fiscal year will be over, and that's part of why the spending is so low right now for 2018-19.
So if you don't spend the 5.8, you can enroll it for the next year?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I think it would be appropriate to move to public comment at this point to hear what they have to say, and then bring it back to us, and we can maybe make a recommendation.
Thank you. So now I have you and Ms. Lipovich reminding me.
Go home.
Okay. So, let's do that. Let's open up the public comment. Would any member of the public like to comment? And I'd like to ask you if you could limit your comments to about 3 minutes, but we have a lot of latitude when you give us something good.
Okay, I'll just stay back here. Okay, good evening. Michael Saint with Campaign for Sustainable Transportation. You each have the website there in front of you, as well as our mission. I'm a very big EV enthusiast, and I feel incentivizing EVs is a great thing to do. I am a little bit concerned that there's nothing in there about mass transit. I feel that putting all the money towards EV programs and their infrastructure or it's already covered by state, federal, and also local air resource boards. As mentioned on our MBCP website, our #1 goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Having an EV helps this goal, but does not reduce congestion, and I think a couple of the council members brought this up, or the greenhouse gas emissions produced by building these EVs. The best way to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions is to eliminate the source, which is the cars. And the best way is through mass transit. It's a geometrical solution. You get a lot more people in a small area, you can eliminate a lot of cars. Would like to recommend using some of our funds for supporting an eco-pass program in any jurisdiction as a pilot program to study the effects of how this eliminates single car occupancy and especially focus on downtown employees. An example of this is Santa Cruz Metro has offered free bus passes to downtown employees to help reduce the necessity of more cars downtown and also to avoid more infrastructure built for cars. Examples of success rates here are Boulder, Colorado, Stanford University have done this, and it has been a very successful program. Stanford avoided having to build a huge garage for 5,000 new students and staff because of the EcoPass program. Metro's cost for this one-year program is $311,000. Presently, Santa Cruz City is in their agenda items. They are trying to either fund it or not, but it can also be done in other jurisdictions. And basically the alternative, they want to build a new garage. Metro program's $311,000 per year. The garage will be $2.9 million a year. We have a twofold problem, transportation being the number one greenhouse gas emission problem, and congestion. Mass transit, alternatives like transportation demand management takes care of both these problems. Also, this program helps those in need and also to get work back and forth for free, and is very good for social justice. Families are now paying about 1/5 of their home expenses owning a car. My group, Sustainable Transportation, would love to make a presentation to the CAC on the very subject. You can also go to our website, which I have there in front of you, which I have handed out. There you find experts and videos on transportation demand management, and we've been doing this for about 18 years, so there are some very good videos there. So I'd recommend item 8 be discussed further and studied to include other alternatives to invest in. Thank you for your time.
Very good. While someone else is coming forward, I'd like to ask a question. I'm not sure if it would be to Ms. Lipanovich or Mr. Habashi. Under the JPA, would it be a useful recommendation? In other words, can we indeed recommend spending these funds that would basically go into another agency? Correct? I mean, maybe I'm not asking it correctly.
I think
in other words,
it's not going to other agencies.
This is not a new issue. Public transportation problem existed long before Monterey Bay Clean Power did.
I think if the question is, does it serve the primary goal or the primary mission of this agency, it does one, which is reduction of greenhouse gas. Granted, initially when this group got together and decided to form Monterey Bay Community Power, their purpose was to try to increase the portfolio of renewable resources in our power mix, but we started on 100% carbon free, and we are looking to do something on the transportation side. Obviously, with the EV program or the EV chargers or any of the other programs that we're looking at, there's the element of electricity component being part of it. Just going after the transportation, mass transportation, to try to get people out of their vehicle, it does eventually help us achieve one of the 3 goals that we have. I don't know what it does to the other 2, which is investment in local jurisdiction, as well as reducing rates or reducing bills. I think it's worthy for this group to look into it, and to the extent that this is something that you want to support, we certainly would look at it.
Yeah, so I guess my question really was, is there anything in the JPA that prohibits us from making a recommendation like that? And the answer is no.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I think it makes me, I think there's some thought to how the process would work when it comes to final approval.
Yeah.
If one member of the Joint Powers Agreement is like benefited to a significant extent, more than the rest of the members. But then in that case, it's definitely not prohibited. It's just how the approval process would go and the voting would go.
Right.
Would need to take into that into consideration.
That's a can of worms.
So it's going to happen.
Yeah, that's going to come up with everything, I believe.
Yeah.
So we have another.
No, go ahead.
Okay, another public comment. Ms. Jensen, correct?
Yes, Brennan Jensen. I also serve as the co-chair for the Monterey Bay Regional Climate Action Compact. And so I wanted to make a few statements. So first of all, to Beth, you've done really a tremendous job in going out to other agencies and kind of to the universe of potential programs and pulling together, I think, a really nice summary of potential opportunities and creating some recommendations for a place to get started. So I think this is a great place to get started. And I also appreciate the comments that this is a continued discussion and a continued ideation process. I heard from Chair Byron and also from Andy Hartman and I believe Seth as well, Caprone, that there was really desire to continue this dialogue perhaps in a public study session where more questions could be asked. And I'd like to use the word ideation. You know, I think that we have a tremendous resource of folks within this area that have a lot of very specific programs that they would like to see move forward, and a lot of analysis potentially that's already been done that this body could benefit from. So again, not to say anything about any of the projects that have been proposed here, but I think that there may be some additional ones that could be considered. And it also brings up the question a little bit about how these programs ultimately are prioritized and funded over time, especially over the long term. So I know that was initially envisioned to be a 6 or 8 month process. And I would like to encourage that still moves forward even as some of this funding is identified for immediate deployment, which I think is great. So I also want to commend the agency for identifying some specific funding to go towards data analysis from third-party consultants. I think that is really essential to driving data-based choices that will help to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And I appreciate the framing from J.R. Killigrew to get us started tying this back into the climate action plans. And I want to encourage more discussion on that. Again, many of these climate action plans have specific programs that have already been identified, quantified, and prioritized. And so that's a resource to think about how we can make sure that we are leveraging the fact that we have this local agency. The biggest opportunity is we get an opportunity to stack functions. Byron, to your earlier comment, we have agencies that are trying to provide for infrastructure within our area. If we can solve 2 different problems with the same solution, that's an opportunity that we uniquely have that the prior utilities did not. So I want to encourage that. I also just would like to ask that I think a little bit more clarity on the timelines for how these programs will move through time. It looks like some of these are maybe 1-year programs, some of them might be 3-year programs or 5-year programs, and it feels a little confusing, and I think that will help everybody to try to understand where they can promote some complementary opportunities and resources so folks can be more successful. So thank you. Great work.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening, council members. My name is Piet Cannon from Ecology Action. Ecology Action is a local nonprofit. We've been around since 1970. We started with a recycling center, and since that time, some almost 50 years, our focus has been on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and resource conservation, and we've served tens of thousands of Monterey Bay area residents and businesses. And we also are a fiscal sponsor of the Monterey Bay Electric Vehicle Alliance, and there are some members here. And Christy Markey is one of those members, and she had to leave, and she's the one that Beth referred to in terms of an EV owner who isn't feasibly able to, charge her car at home, so she figures out ways how to charge it outside of her home, which is not an easy task. So she's definitely a diehard, and she wanted me to also, since she's the chair of that group, she wanted me to talk a little bit about what Enviva does. So I'm going to speak for her too. Enviva has been around for about 5 years plus, and really we're trying to speed the adoption of electric vehicles in the region. We've worked with the Air District, worked with a lot of cities, a lot of colleges and other businesses and residents and entities throughout the region. One of the things that we've kind of focused in on in Enviva is the public education side. So a lot of people, just have a sense of a Tesla, which is out of range for a lot of people in terms of a price point, as an electric vehicle. And so we try and get people behind the wheel of an electric car and test ride it and see and find out what it's all about. So to that end, recently we did a National Drive Electric Day. There's some couple hundred people that attended, looked at vehicles, talked to owners. There's some people here who brought their cars to, private owners to test, let people drive in there, because they're people that drive electric cars are enthusiasts, and they believe it's a great way to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and make a more sustainable community. So, and then Enviva has a website that people can go to that, if they want to know what are the rebates available. It's a confusing field out there, all the different options. They can go and see what's available to them. So that's some of the things that Enviva does. And then in terms of Ecology Action, we're the fiscal sponsor of that group. And then also, we worked on a grant to install 40 electric vehicle chargers throughout the Monterey Bay, level 2 chargers. And so the Air District has one of the chargers that we were able to, project managing it installed. People like Andy Hartman, worked on the ground with him, so we kind of understand some of the obstacles of, getting those chargers in the ground. And obviously, this group has significantly more money to do a really large-scale deployment of EV chargers. So we applaud staff for the thoroughness of their, looking at what proposals to put forward in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. There's been a lot of studies come out of places like the governor's office who have definitely pinpointed EVs as a way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at a large scale. So great to see that, and great to see that staff is also working with an agency like Ecology Action. We've worked in the Monterey Bay quite a bit. One of our biggest influences in the Bay is really through energy efficiency, working with small and medium-sized businesses. So being able to work with them to change how they look at their operations and be more environmental, and also see the economic benefits of it too. So we understand some of the hurdles of working with that, constituency that could be beneficial in terms of getting these EV chargers in the ground. So just want to really applaud staff for leveraging all those funds for the CEC, working with the Air District to make it multiply that effort, and then for, this agency in terms of moving forward with this plan. So thank you.
So thank you for your comments. Please take the acronym and give us the whole name of the organization.
So Ecology Action is the organization, and then the Monterey Bay Electric Vehicle Alliance is a group that we fiscally sponsor. So they're really
who's we?
So Ecology Action is the
okay.
nonprofit that's been around since 1970.
I know Ecology Action.
Yeah. So and then the Monterey Bay Electric Vehicle Alliance is more of a volunteer-driven organization. We staff it. Ecology Action does, but without volunteers, it wouldn't have the legs that it does.
Thank you. I was just trying to get you to spell out Enviva so that we knew what it meant.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hi there, I'm Tiffany Weiswest. I'm the Sustainability and Climate Action Manager for the City of Santa Cruz, and I just want to reiterate a lot of what's been said. These programs truly are helping local jurisdictions. They will help local jurisdictions to achieve their climate action goals. We have not only an emissions reduction goal, but 12 other goals specified in our climate action plan. These programs will help us to address at least half of them and make progress towards them. We also have 254 actions specified in our climate action plan. These programs are specific actions that are called out in our climate action plan. So I'm really thrilled that this will really help us bring capacity, and with the electrification study, some analytics that are desperately needed. The one thing that I do want to ask you to remember as a staffer that works only part-time, and I know that others in our region are part-time as well, in guiding our cities towards achieving these goals, is that implementation of some of these programs actually will require capacity in order to project manage EV charging station installation, that kind of thing. And that's capacity that we currently are fairly limited on. So I ask you to think.
You don't mean electric capacity. What do you mean?
I mean staff capacity to project manage installation of projects, implementation of projects. A lot of that's being taken on by MBCP, but there will be that need on the local jurisdiction level to provide project managers for infrastructure. So I ask you to think about that when you are both designing the program, refining the program as well, and just thank you, MBCP, and good job, Beth. This is really looking great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other public comment, let's move to am I on item 9? Yes. Okay, so that was the end of item 8, correct?
There's action.
We need a
and-
recommendation.
Looking for a
Sorry.
motion.
Yes.
So I would move that we, I want to get the right word here, support the FY 2018-19 programs as proposed in the presentation.
Can I second that?
Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, support staff recommendation as stated in staff report, yes. Thank you.
Excellent. Any questions or comments?
Sure, and I'll support the motion also, so I'll start with that. Several things were mentioned here related to public transportation, which fully we should look at some point in time. We will probably need to partner with other organizations in order to make that happen, or agencies, excuse me. And maybe it might be prudent to have MST or TAMSI or some of the other transportation agencies come and make a presentation about what they're doing on public transportation. And I know at least one of those agencies currently is offering bus passes to the underprivileged communities. So I think that would be important for us to hear at some point in time. I think right now, at least my feeling is that that's maybe a little too big a bite for us at this point. So I support what we're doing here for the initial programs and how we're moving forward with that. And I also wanted to compliment Beth, because I think you did a really good job of explaining this and making it, synthesizing it into language and numbers that we can understand and work through. And I think this conversation was good, and I appreciate all the public comments. Thank you.
Good comment. I'd like to add to that, Mr. Grid. I think we also need some additional presentations to understand how transportation may be evolving, and our thinking may need to be evolving with it, with third-party ownership of vehicles and electric vehicles and increased utilization with autonomous vehicles. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going to be changing in the near future with regard to how transportation might play out.
Well, and I'll just add, I spent yesterday afternoon with the California Transportation Commission in Gonzales, and not once did they mention electrification of our vehicles. It was pretty interesting.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Voice vote acceptable?
Yes.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. And I'm so sorry that I completely forgot that that's what we needed to do on item 8, so thank you, Mr. Stedman. Item 9, CAC member report on matters concerning related to MBCP plans and programs in each community member's community. That sounds pretty specific. I wanted to add some general comments before I turn it over to my other my other members. I noted here I wanted to make sure to thank Mr. Habashi for following through from last month's meeting, and with your appointment of Dr. Bueno to your Energy Risk Management Committee. You had indicated in the meeting that we would get that representation or participation, and I want to thank you for agreeing to do that and for you for appointing them. Did you want to add anything else to that?
Yes, he actually attended his first meeting today. I hope it was informative.
First, thank you as well, Tom, and everybody here. Yeah, it was very informative, a lot of information. I look forward to learning a lot more, and honored. Thanks.
Okay. I hope that you'll be able to present back to us periodically what's going on there without disclosing any confidential information.
Yeah, I think I'll have to talk to Tom and find out, what's appropriate or not.
Okay. Let's see, the other thing I wanted to note was that, of course, it was brought up that the Cal CCA meeting took place a couple of weeks ago, and I'm so appreciative that many of you were able to attend. I hope it was worthwhile, because it is a real treat that it was nearby. And if you can pull that off where you've got them here every year, because it's centrally located and it's such a beautiful facility, we would certainly benefit by that.
Yeah, that's what I keep saying, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
And to you, Mr. Abashi, I think we'd be interested in hearing more about the Go Local RFO perhaps at the next meeting. So we'll discuss whether or not that should be added or could be added to the next agenda item meeting. If you've moved further with that, I think that would be of interest to this committee.
Yeah, I think we're definitely ready to talk to you about this item in October.
And the power supply mix, because you'll be doing some additional contracting between now and then, correct?
Yes, I think the power supply mix probably has nothing to do with the contract executions that we are in the process of doing. This is more of just to talk about what the current supply mix is and how could it change in the future, how it will change in the future based on the latest approval of SB 100. And if we want to do something different, or if we want to do something in addition to what we are doing right now, what would that be? What the cost of that would be? And we're going to try to do that in October. If not, it will be in November.
Thank you. Would any other members like to say anything in our final agenda item? Mr. Stedman, thank you.
Never at a loss for words.
No,
I'll
that's
keep this
fine.
really
I
brief.
would have felt terrible if I was the only one.
Okay, so last week I attended the International Climate Change Conference, which was up in the Bay Area.
Oh, really?
And we
That's a
actually...
pretty high-level conference.
It was very high level. We actually had one of the buses that had a CAT scan unit on it for lung disease come down to our electric vehicle drive demonstration day, and Monterey Bay Community Powers there. But that was the first event we held at our office. So we really liked the momentum that was caused by that. Also, there's a new initiative at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, which would be really nice to tag on to. It's called Diesel Free by 33. And yes, that's 2033. So Jerry Brown is looking to phase out all combustion by 2050 or so. So this is something that's actually putting pen to paper and hopefully will be implemented. And there's a lot of electrification of the fleets in the Bay Area, and that reaches down to our area as well. So I just encourage you to look into that. And then this will make Seth happy. We're installing a couple charging stations down at Camp Roberts, rest stops. And these are the first rest stops in the state, I'd say in the nation and probably the world, that's going to have a solar charging level 2 charge, fast charger, and battery backup. So we'll be able to charge vehicles at night in the off hours. So it's a really marvelous project, and it's going to be on both sides of the highway at both rest stops. And those are just basically offloaded on a skid. There's no connection to the grid whatsoever. So there's no trenching or anything like that. So it's going to be a really novel setup. And then, so that should be opening up in October sometime. And then also with that, we're going to also be opening up a new 6 charging station at in Prunedale at the 101 interchange there. And that actually has 6 pedestals with a capacity for 12 vehicles, and that also has battery backup. So there is the chance to generate on-site electricity and store it and use it to charge electric vehicles. So we look forward to working with Monterey Bay Community Power as well, because I think we can leverage a lot of these funds, and it's a really exciting time, and I'm just overjoyed to be part of this and see this taking shape.
That's tremendous. Are those level 2 or level 3? Those
Level 2.
Okay, that makes sense. Wow, excellent.
I'll jump
Anybody
in.
else want to announce they're installing 18 new chargers, Mr. Hartman?
No, I won't. But I would like to say thank you for allowing me to go to the CalCCA meeting. I thought it was pretty informative, interesting group of people to listen to. Some of the panels were great, and it was awesome to see Councilmember Osmer up there on stage too. I did want to mention that I don't know if it was yesterday or today, but the governor signed the Diablo Canyon bill. And one of the articles that I read about it looks like PG&E is going to be increasing their rates. They estimate around 1.2%. And so I think that's something that we need to talk about.
Is that associated with the shutdown? Is that what those additional costs are?
The closure of Diablo Canyon. Because I've been getting a lot of comments about from constituents that, you know, they're saying, oh, my, you know, now that we've switched over to Monterey Bay Community Power, my bill has gone up. And so this is sort of what I've been trying to bring awareness to all along, is that although we may be at a lower rate than PG&E, what is the end result to the customer, and what does their bill look like at the end of the day? And so if they're having that impression, I mean, I think we really need to ramp up the educational campaign in regards to what the bills are like. And so it's great, you know, what Mr. Hibashi is doing with that, but it just as soon as it can hit the streets, I think that would be great, and just as much as we can do around that education would be really beneficial for us. That's all I have.
Excellent.
The Aromas Progressive Action League that I've been working with, we're not putting in any electric chargers, but we've been working with the larger electrical users in our local geographical area, and the San Benito Health Foundation has signed a contract. They're going to put in, they've got a 17,000 square foot public health facility, federally funded public health facility. They're going to cover the roof with solar panels, and they're going to put a really large battery in, so they shouldn't be affecting the duct curve. It's a battery big enough to keep them operating for a week. It's like a microgrid to keep them going in the event of a national emergency or a power emergency. And we're working with other large users in the area trying to get similar projects built.
A week of operation off the grid?
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. Wow, thank you. Any other comments from members? So I'll close with this. I apologize if I don't run more efficient meetings. My general philosophy here is going to be that there's plenty of time for comment. I think we will get more efficient at our consent agenda items, and I apologize that discussion went on long, but I want to make sure the public knows and understands there will always be plenty of time to hear from them.
Do you want to give the public a chance to comment on that last agenda item?
I will, thank you. and if indeed we do go drag on way too long, I look to my council members to say, speed it up, okay? So thank you for that reminder, Ms. Labinovich. Any members of the public wish to comment on the last agenda item, discussion of report outs by our various members? Seeing none, we're adjourned until our next meeting on October 18th.